Hello there, and welcome to Planet in Question, where curiosity takes a slow, thoughtful walk and science finds room to breathe. Tonight, we're going to drift into a question that's both ancient and astonishingly modern. A question that doesn't ask for quick answers, but for quiet imagination. What if everything we call reality, every grain of sand, every heartbeat, every sunrise is part of a simulation? Not a digital one with computers and screens necessarily, but a grand, cosmic version of the same idea. What if Earth itself was created, tuned and sustained as a kind of living experiment, a simulation for life? Before we step into that idea, take a moment to notice where you are right now. Are you listening in the soft quiet of your room, the dim glow of a lamp nearby? Maybe you're already lying in bed, letting your mind loosen its grip on the day. Maybe it's morning where you are, a cup of tea cooling beside you as the world stirs awake. Or perhaps you're on a long journey, watching the scenery roll by, letting words become a kind of landscape of their own. However this finds you, let this thought unfold slowly, like fog lifting from a lake. You don't need to believe in it, or even decide what you think. You only need to listen and imagine, and let the idea breathe. When people hear the word simulation, they often think of something cold and digital, a computer generating images on a screen, an artificial world made of numbers. But maybe that's too small a picture. Maybe the simulation we're in, if we are in one, is not mechanical but organic. Maybe it's built not of pixels and wires, but of atoms, light and time. Imagine the universe as a vast, evolving computation, a system designed to see what life will do when the conditions are just right. Imagine Earth not as a random planet, but as a carefully balanced experiment, a world seeded with the potential for consciousness, creativity, and love. It's a strange idea, but not a new one. Long before computers existed, people were already wondering whether the world around them was truly real. Ancient philosophers in India spoke of Maya, the great illusion that veils the ultimate truth. Plato imagined people chained in a cave, watching shadows on a wall and mistaking them for reality. The mystics of nearly every culture have whispered that the world is a kind of dream, vivid, meaningful, but not quite solid. So when we talk about simulations today, with our modern vocabulary of code and data, we might just be updating an old intuition. That reality could be something that is run, not simply is. If Earth were a simulation, what would that mean? Would there be someone or something running it? Would it have a purpose? Or would it simply be an exploration of what life can become? Maybe it's not about control at all, but curiosity. Maybe the point is to let life unfold, to see what intelligence does when given a place to grow. Like planting a seed and watching a forest emerge, perhaps the simulation was never meant to be manipulated, only observed. Think about how perfectly Earth seems tuned for life. We orbit in a narrow band around the sun, not too hot, not too cold. Our atmosphere is just right for breathing. Our oceans are stable, our magnetic field protects us from radiation. Even the moon, with its particular size and distance, stabilizes our planet's tilt and tides, shaping the rhythms that guide life. To many scientists, that's simply the outcome of chance, filtered through billions of possibilities. But to others, it feels a little too precise, too balanced, like settings adjusted on a cosmic console. Could this balance be part of the simulation's design? A deliberate calibration to see what kind of creatures might arise? Now picture the first sparks of life, tiny cells forming in warm pools of water billions of years ago. They replicate, evolve, diversify. From them come fish, trees, birds, mammals, eventually, us. It's an elegant sequence, almost algorithmic. Evolution, when you look closely, behaves like a self-correcting program. Errors, or mutations, are tested against the environment. Those that fail are deleted. Those that work are saved and copied forward. Over time, complexity builds, as if the simulation itself is learning. Perhaps the code of life isn't written in ones and zeros, but in molecules, probabilities, and choices. And what about consciousness? The awareness that watches all of this unfold. Could that be part of the system too? An emergent feature that allows the simulation to observe itself? It's hard to say where awareness begins or why it exists at all, but it's here, in us, and it colors everything. It turns the physical into the personal. It turns a collection of atoms into a being that can wonder. Maybe that was the purpose all along, to create something that could not only exist, but ask why it exists. If that's true, then we're not just players inside a simulation. We are the simulation, experiencing itself from within. Every thought, every emotion, every act of kindness or cruelty adds another layer to the unfolding story. The experiment isn't happening to us. It's happening through us. Of course, not everyone finds this idea comforting. Some find it eerie, the thought that our lives might be observed, measured, or even programmed. But maybe observation isn't surveillance. Maybe it's care. Think of a scientist tending to a terrarium, or a gardener watching seedlings push through the soil. The gardener doesn't control each leaf or root. They simply make sure the conditions are right, then stand back in quiet awe. What if the simulation works the same way, a system watched not by cold machines, but by consciousness itself, curious to see what grows in the garden of earth? And then there's another possibility, one that feels both humbling and beautiful. What if there's no designer at all? What if the simulation runs itself? The universe might be a self-generating pattern, an infinite loop that needs no beginning or end. Every law of physics, every constant, every atom could be part of an elegant feedback system that naturally creates complexity. From chaos comes order, from order comes life, from life comes awareness, and from awareness, the urge to create simulations of our own. Perhaps this is the pattern, repeating each layer, creating the next, like mirrors reflecting into eternity. Some scientists already toy with the idea that our universe behaves like a computational system. Quantum mechanics hints at discrete units of information, like bits in a cosmic code. Space and time themselves may not be continuous, but pixelated, updating at unimaginably small intervals. And then there's the uncanny precision of mathematics itself. Why does math, an abstract invention of human minds, so perfectly describe the workings of the universe? It's almost as if reality was written in its language, as if we were discovering the programming syntax of existence. It's easy to get lost in these thoughts, to start seeing meaning in every coincidence or pattern. But that's part of the magic too. The human brain is both the subject and the observer of the simulation, capable of awe and doubt at the same time. We can hold these questions lightly, like shells picked up on a beach. We don't have to solve them. We can just admire their shape, their texture, the mystery they contain. So tonight, as you listen, think of this not as a lecture but as a lullaby for the mind. Let the idea drift through you like a slow current. Maybe Earth really is a simulation, a grand living test to see what awareness can become. Or maybe it's something else entirely, something even deeper and more mysterious than our words can touch. Either way, we are here, in this moment, inside whatever this reality is, breathing, wondering, alive. And perhaps that's all the evidence we need, that the simulation, if it exists, is not a cage, but a canvas, a place for life to unfold, to make mistakes, to learn and to love. The fact that we can ask this question at all might be the most beautiful part of the program. So, let's stay with that thought as we drift onward into the quiet space between science and dream, where imagination can rest and curiosity can bloom. Chapter 1. The Quiet Question. Let's begin slowly, the way one might ease into a still lake before dawn. There's no rush here, no need to decide what's true or false. We're simply wandering into a question, a quiet one that hums beneath so many others. Could life itself be unfolding inside a simulation? Not as a scene from a movie filled with blinking lights and coded screens, but as a calm and ancient mystery. Maybe the universe, this whole luminous expanse, is more like a dream being dreamt, a pattern running itself, or a story told from the inside out. Every age has its way of wondering about the same thing. Long ago, people might have said the world was painted on the inside of a divine mind, or spun from the imagination of a cosmic weaver. Later, philosophers spoke of illusion and shadow, of veils between appearance and truth. Today, with our language of data and algorithms, we reach for new metaphors. We say simulation, not dream, program, not creation. But the heart of the question hasn't changed. It's still about whether what we experience is solid, the feel of rain on skin, the warmth of sunlight through a window, the sound of our own heartbeat is as real as it seems, or whether it's the surface of something deeper. If you close your eyes for a moment, notice the way your thoughts appear and fade. how sensations shift and flow. There's a strangeness to awareness itself, isn't there? You can see, feel, think, and yet you don't quite know where the seeing or thinking begins. It's as if life happens inside a theatre that we never fully leave. We experience the play, but the backstage remains hidden. The idea that Earth could be a simulation is another way of asking what that backstage is made of, and who, if anyone, is watching the show unfold. If you were to design a simulation, you might start with rules, not laws written in books, but in the fabric of existence itself. You'd decide how matter behaves, how light travels, how energy moves. You'd set constant speed, mass, charge so that the world runs smoothly and predictably enough for patterns to form. Then you'd let it go. You'd let stars ignite, planets gather, oceans ripple. You'd wait, patient as eternity, to see if something unexpected begins to stir within the rules you wrote. Perhaps the emergence of life would be the moment when the code begins to dream for itself. That's what makes this question so haunting. It connects the smallest and largest scales. From the pulse of a cell dividing to the slow drift of galaxies, everything seems to follow order and yet hold mystery. A seed knows how to grow into a tree, and the tree knows how to find the sun. Our DNA holds instructions older than any civilization. Even chaos, when studied closely, hides structure. If you've ever watched waves forming patterns on a beach or frost spiraling across glass, you've seen something that feels both wild and intentional. Maybe that's what the simulation would look like if we were inside it. An ordered chaos, precise enough to sustain beauty, loose enough to allow surprise. The philosopher Nick Bostrom once suggested that if advanced civilizations are capable of running highly detailed simulations, and if they have any interest in doing so, then it's statistically likely that we are living in one. The argument sounds almost mathematical, but beneath it is a very human intuition. The universe seems just a little too fine-tuned for comfort. It's not just that we exist, but that we exist in a world so perfectly balanced between chaos and Paris. Calm that life can flourish. Change the strength of gravity, the charge of the electron, or the expansion rate of the cosmos by a fraction, and nothing like us could ever have appeared. It's as though the settings were chosen, as though someone or something pressed run simulation long ago. But before the idea becomes heavy, let's remember, it doesn't have to be cold or mechanical. A simulation in this sense could be an act of creativity, not control. Think of a painter stepping back from a canvas, watching colours blend in ways they didn't plan, or a musician improvising, letting sound unfold freely. Maybe the universe works the same way, an ongoing performance that no single player fully understands, including the ones who started it. Perhaps life wasn't programmed to obey, but to explore. There's another angle, gentler and more intimate. What if the simulation isn't out there at all? What if it's happening inside consciousness itself? Every colour you see, every sound you hear, is already a kind of internal rendering. The brain translates electrical impulses into sights and sounds, turning waves and particles into meaning. You never experience the world directly, only your interpretation of it. In that way, each of us lives inside a personal simulation, a private version of reality shaped by memory, expectation, and emotion. Maybe the grand cosmic simulation, if it exists, simply scales that up. One vast field of perception, where every living thing contributes a piece to the whole. Sometimes in the small hours of the night, this idea can feel almost tender. To think that the universe might be a conscious system, aware of itself through us, makes everything feel more connected. The wind through trees, the pattern of stars, even the quiet hum of a refrigerator are all part of the same living process. It's less about control and more about communion. The simulation isn't something trapping us. It's something we are. The experiment isn't being run on us. It's being run as us. Still, the mind resists. We crave certainty. We want to touch something undeniably real. Yet, when we reach for that, we always end up holding more questions. The more we learn, the more mysterious the world becomes. The smallest particles dissolve into probability. The universe expands into silence. Somewhere between those extremes we find ourselves thinking, feeling, asking. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the question itself is part of the design, the simulation's way of wondering about its own nature. If Earth were a simulation for life, what might it be trying to discover? Perhaps how cooperation evolves from competition, or how compassion emerges from struggle. Maybe it's an experiment in consciousness. What happens when awareness is given freedom to create, to destroy, to love, to dream? Every choice, every act of kindness or cruelty could be data in an unfolding story about what it means to be alive. And perhaps the moment we ask if it's real, the simulation nods quietly to itself and says, "They're starting to notice." And yet, what a beautiful thing to notice. Look around. The way light bends at sunset, the way rivers carve through stone, the way laughter fills a room. Whether these things are real in the deepest sense or simulated doesn't change their wonder. They still move us, still make life feel worth living. If anything, the idea that all of this could be an intricate design only adds another layer of awe. Even if it's a simulation, it's still breathtaking. The rules, the math, the balance, it all feels like poetry written in atoms. Perhaps that's why people return to this question generation after generation. It holds a quiet promise that there is meaning woven through the fabric of existence, even if we can't yet read it clearly. Maybe we're not random. Maybe we're part of something vast and ongoing, a story so big that our small lives still fit perfectly inside it. So, as you sit or lie wherever you are, let that thought rest gently in your mind. Could Earth be a simulation for life? Maybe. Or maybe the question itself is the simulation each time we wonder. The universe listens and asks again. And in that exchange, something alive and eternal happens. Curiosity meeting creation. The code and the consciousness becoming one. That's the quiet question. And tonight, we'll let it echo softly as we move deeper into this mystery. Unhurried, unafraid, and wide awake to wonder. Chapter 2. The Stage Called Earth. When we talk about Earth, we often think of it as a place, a planet, a rock orbiting a star, a home we happen to find ourselves on. But tonight, let's imagine something softer, something stranger. Imagine Earth not as a location, but as a stage so intricate, so carefully balanced, that life could perform its endless variations upon it. If the universe were a grand simulation, then Earth might be its most fascinating experiment, the theatre where consciousness learns to play. And perhaps every mountain, every drop of rain, every shift of wind was set so that the play could go on exactly as it does. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the world from far above, a sphere of swirling blue and white, wrapped in thin breath, glowing faintly in the blackness of space. From that distance it looks perfect, delicate, yet complete, alive in a way that no other planet we've seen quite matches. It spins just fast enough to keep its balance, tilts just enough to create seasons, holds just enough gravity to keep its oceans from drifting away. It is as though it were built with intention, parameters set with exquisite precision. If this were a simulation, Earth would be the level that's been fine-tuned over billions of years for one thing to sustain and evolve life. Think of all the variables that have to align for life to exist here. The distance from the sun, the tilt of our axis, the size of the moon, the chemical makeup of the atmosphere, the existence of water, a plate tectonics, a magnetic field that shields us from solar winds. All of these are pieces of an intricate puzzle. A single misstep, and the pattern might not hold. It's easy to say this is coincidence, the random luck of cosmic dice. But when you step back and look at the total picture, it starts to feel deliberate, almost theatrical, as if someone or something wanted to see what would happen if the conditions were just right. Maybe the simulation wasn't designed for us specifically, but for the process of life itself. Imagine an experiment, not in domination or purpose, but in emergence. You could call it a cosmic sandbox, an environment designed not with strict outcomes, but with rules flexible enough for endless possibility. Life, then, would be the simulation running itself, testing every path it can find. It's as if the code of the universe whispers, "Try this, and see what grows." A planet forms, cools, rains. Chemistry begins to hum, molecules meet and dance, and something new emerges. Awareness, fragile and curious, looking up at the stars from which it came. Earth is astonishing not because it's rare, but because it's dynamic. It never sits still. Continents shift like slow-moving rafts across the mantle. Climates ebb and flow. Oceans swallow coasts and retreat again. Species bloom, vanish, and bloom again. The planet is alive in a geological sense, an ever-changing system where balance comes not from stillness but from movement. If this were a simulation, Earth's variability might be its key feature, a world built to evolve, to see how many forms life could take, how many ways existence could express itself within the same framework. Even the disasters have a strange beauty when you think of them as part of a larger design. Mass extinctions, volcanic winters, ice ages, all of them clear the board, forcing life to invent again. It's like a game that resets not to punish the player, but to see what new strategies will emerge. Dinosaurs ruled the stage for over 100 million years, then exited suddenly, leaving space for mammals to improvise. And from those mammals, one day, came us creatures capable of asking whether the entire thing might have been arranged. If Earth is a stage, then every element of it plays a role. The oceans, vast and ancient, serve as both cradle and mirror. They regulate temperature, store memory in their currents, and hum with unseen life. The forests breathe in rhythm with the sky, their green leaves translating light into sugar and sunlight into survival. Even deserts, with their emptiness, seem purposeful, a test of endurance, a contrast to make abundance mean something. Everywhere you look, life and environment interact as though following choreography older than time itself. Consider the moon again, our silent companion. It is unusually large for a moon and positioned perfectly to stabilize Earth's wobble, keeping our seasons gentle enough for life to flourish. It also controls the tides, stirring the oceans where early life may have taken its first steps onto land. Without it, the story might have gone differently. Is that coincidence? Or is it part of the set design, a cosmic prop placed exactly where it needs to be? Then there's the atmosphere, a thin veil that keeps us safe and nourished. It filters sunlight, traps warmth, and shields us from meteors. It's composed of nitrogen and oxygen in just the right proportions, yet it wasn't always that way. Billions of years ago, the air was toxic. Life itself, tiny microbes transformed it, releasing oxygen and reshaping the planet. In that sense, the simulation might not just run life, it might let life rewrite the rules as it goes. Earth evolves life, and life evolves Earth in return, as if the stage and the players were one and the same. Everywhere we look, there's feedback, a loop of cause and effect so balanced that it feels intelligent, even if it isn't. Coral reefs build structures that protect coastlines. Trees exchange gases that regulate temperature. Rivers carve valleys that guide rainfall patterns. It's all connected, all recursive, like code referencing itself endlessly. Maybe that's the signature of the simulation, the presence of self-reference, a world aware of itself through its own systems. And then, of course, there's us, human beings, the strangest actors on this stage. We are part of the ecosystem, yet we seem to stand slightly apart from it, conscious of our roles, aware of the play. We build cities, write music, tell stories and dream of the stars. We invent machines that can mimic thought, and now we build simulations of our own. In a sense, we've become the creators inside the creation, repeating the act that may have given rise to us. The simulation, if that's what this is, has reached a new layer life capable of simulating itself. Sometimes, I wonder if that's the point. Maybe the test isn't about survival or dominance, but about awareness. Maybe the purpose of this world is for something within it to wake up, look around, and say, I see what's happening. Maybe the moment of realization, the quiet awe when we glimpse the pattern, is the experiment's goal. Not to find answers, but to generate wonder, because wonder changes the code. It deepens it. It gives the simulation meaning. The stage of Earth is not silent. It hums with the low murmur of wind through leaves, waves against shores, tectonic plates whispering far below. It's a living soundscape, an endless composition. Sometimes the music swells, storms, thunder, the crash of waves. Sometimes it softens into stillness, fog over hills, snow falling without sound. Every tone, every silence feels intentional, as if reality itself were improvising. If you listen long enough, you might begin to hear the rhythm of it, the heartbeat of the planet beneath all the noise. If the Earth is a simulation, then we are both audience and performers, both inside and outside the story. We live the experience, but we also reflect on it, shaping the narrative as we go. The stage may have been set billions of years ago, but the play is being written every second by tides, by forests, by us. And maybe the ones who built it, if they exist, are watching not for victory or failure, but for beauty, for the subtle ways life finds to endure, to adapt, to love. Perhaps the truest clue that Earth might be a simulation isn't in its perfection, but in its imperfection. The jagged edges, the unpredictability, the fragile balance that can shift in an instant, those are signs of freedom. A simulation too precise would be lifeless, too chaotic, meaningless. But this world sits between the two, poised like a dancer, unpredictable yet somehow whole. That's what makes it feel real. That's what makes it feel alive. So tonight, as you listen, think of yourself not as a bystander in this vast experiment, but as part of its unfolding. The breath you take, the thoughts that move quietly through your mind, the awareness that listens to these words, all of it belongs to the stage called Earth. And whether or not it's a simulation doesn't matter as much as this, that it is happening right now in the only way it ever could. Maybe the purpose of the play is simply this moment, life noticing itself and smiling softly in the dark. Chapter 3. Patterns in Nature. When you walk through a forest, the air feels alive in a way that's hard to describe. It isn't just the sound of leaves or the smell of earth, it's the rhythm, the sense that everything moves according to some hidden pulse. Ferns uncurl in spirals, rivers twist like veins through valleys, clouds scatter in fractal shapes that echo the ground below. If you pause long enough, you begin to see it. The repetition, the symmetry, the quiet mathematics that underlies the wildness. Nature isn't random. It dances to a pattern, and that pattern, if you look closely enough, feels almost like code. Imagine standing on a beach, watching waves roll in. Each one is different, some tall and sharp, others soft and slow, but together they form a rhythm so precise that you could almost time your breathing to it. The crests, the troughs, the distances between them all emerge from the same simple principles of energy and motion. No one commands them, they simply are. The same applies to everything else. The branching of trees, the way lightning forks through clouds, the spiral of galaxies. The rules that shape these things are universal, like instructions written into the very fabric of the world. If the universe were a simulation, these patterns might be its fingerprints, traces of the algorithm that makes reality run. Scientists have long noticed this. The same ratios appear again and again, from the swirl of a hurricane to the curl of a seashell. The Fibonacci sequence, a string of numbers that grows by adding the last two together. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on, appears almost everywhere life takes form. You can find it in the petals of flowers, the arrangement of pine cones, even the spiral of your own DNA. The golden ratio, a proportion found pleasing to the eye, governs the growth of everything from sunflower seeds to the structure of galaxies. It's as if the same simple formula is whispered into every act of creation, regardless of scale. There's something deeply soothing about that idea. It means the universe has coherence, that beneath chaos, there's order. And if this world were designed, simulated, even then these recurring ratios and shapes might not be coincidence but efficiency. In programming, elegant solutions often repeat themselves. The same line of code can generate infinite complexity when nested inside itself. Perhaps nature does something similar. The repetition of beauty might not be mere chance, but the sign of a system running, perfectly neither wasteful nor rigid, endlessly expressive within its own limits. Fractals make this visible. A fractal is a pattern that repeats at every level, from the smallest to the largest scale. Look at a coastline from an airplane, and it seems jagged and irregular. Look closer, at a single rock or shell, and you'll see the same shapes repeated in miniature. Snowflakes, ferns, mountain ranges, they all share this self-similar structure. It's a way for complexity to emerge from simplicity. If a single rule says, repeat this shape, but with a small variation each time, you can get forests, rivers, even weather systems. In that sense, the Earth might be like a living fractal, a self-sustaining program that builds infinite diversity out of a few elegant laws. It's not hard to imagine how such a system might have been designed. If you were creating a simulation for life, you wouldn't want to micromanage every detail. You'd want rules that generate endless variation without constant intervention. Patterns that can evolve, adapt, and surprise even their creator. The universe seems to do exactly that. It runs on loops and feedback where outcomes feed back into their own origins. Water evaporates, forms clouds, rains down, flows to the ocean, and begins again. Energy cycles through every living thing, plants to animals to soil and back. Everything is reused, refined, rebalanced. It's the most efficient code imaginable, a closed system that never stops generating novelty. There's another layer to this, one that feels almost personal. We too are made of patterns. The electrical activity of our brains pulses in rhythmic waves. Our hearts beat in cycles. Our sleep follows recurring stages. Our habits loop through days and years. Even thought itself behaves in patterns, one idea leading to another through invisible chains of association. It's as though the same language that governs stars and rivers also runs within us. Maybe, but that's why we recognize beauty when we see it. It's the code recognizing itself. Artists and scientists alike have always tried to capture this harmony. Painters trace spirals in shells and galaxies. Musicians discover scales and rhythms that mirror the frequencies of the natural world. Mathematicians uncover equations that describe everything from the growth of crystals to the movements of planets. Across all these expressions, one thing remains constant: pattern, repetition with variation, predictability woven with surprise. It's the signature of something alive and intelligent, even if we can't name the intelligence behind it. Some might say that calling nature a simulation diminishes its mystery, reducing it to computation. But perhaps it does the opposite. Maybe it deepens the wonder. To think that every ripple on a pond, every gust of wind, every living heartbeat arises from invisible code, doesn't make it less sacred, it makes it miraculous. Imagine a system capable of creating love and loss, beauty and decay, all from the same set of rules. That isn't cold or artificial, it's art, it's poetry made of physics. When you start to notice these repetitions, life begins to feel strangely connected. The veins of a leaf look like river deltas. Neurons in the brain resemble cosmic webs. The micro mirrors the macro, endlessly reflecting itself. Maybe this mirroring is the universe's way of saying, everything belongs. Nothing stands alone because everything shares the same architecture. The simulation, if that's what we're in, doesn't separate the parts. It harmonizes them, letting every detail echo the whole. Even randomness, which seems to defy pattern, plays its role perfectly. Chaos isn't the absence of order, it's the raw material from which order emerges. In weather systems, chaotic motion creates balance. In biology, random mutations drive evolution. A bit of unpredictability is essential to keep the system alive, to prevent stagnation. Maybe that's why we never quite know what tomorrow will bring. The simulation, like a good story, thrives on surprise. And then there are those small, intimate coincidences that feel like secret nods from the universe. You think of someone, and they call you. You dream of a place, then see it the next day. Patterns appear in timing, in encounters, in the rhythm of our lives. We call them chance, but they feel different, deliberate, even kind. Perhaps they are the subtlest signs of how the simulation interacts with itself. Little ripples in the code that remind us we're connected to something vast and unseen. It's comforting, in a quiet way, to think that the world is built on such coherence. It means that no matter how chaotic things appear, there's an underlying rhythm that holds everything together. Even pain and loss have their place, part of the larger balance that keeps the pattern alive. Every end becomes a beginning, every fall a preparation for growth. Nature never wastes a moment. It only transforms. If we are part of that pattern, then our stories are not separate threads but continuous loops in the grand design. So the next time you see the curve of a wave, the branching of a tree, the spiral of a snail shell, pause for a breath. You're looking at the language of reality itself, repeating across scales, across time, whether it's the fingerprint of a divine creator, the output of a cosmic program, or the self-expression of matter and energy, it speaks in the same voice. Symmetry, rhythm, beauty. Maybe that's how the simulation talks to us, not through words, but through form. And when we notice, when we pause and marvel, maybe that's how we talk back. In those moments, the line between observer and creation blurs. You are not just watching the pattern, you are part of it. The same spirals in the galaxies turn quietly in the structure of your lungs, in the rhythm of your heartbeat. The same laws that sculpt mountains guide your thoughts as they rise and fall. If this is a simulation, then you are both its subject and its storyteller, made from the same pattern you perceive. And that realization, gentle as it is, can make the whole world feel sacred, alive with meaning, rich with hidden order, endlessly unfolding in perfect, quiet code. Chapter 4. The Language of Reality. If the world speaks, what language does it use? Not words, not sounds, not gestures, but something quieter, woven into everything that exists. The rustle of wind through leaves, the orbit of moons, the slow, patient growth of mountains, all of them obey the same invisible grammar. It's the language of reality itself, a syntax made of laws, numbers, and relationships that hold the universe together like threads in a vast tapestry. And if this universe is a simulation, then that language might be its code, the structure through which everything is rendered into being. When we look up at the night sky, what we're really seeing is order disguised as chaos. Stars scatter like freckles across blackness, but their arrangement follows rules: gravity, motion, balance. They spin and drift in predictable arcs, their light taking thousands of years to reach us, yet still obeying equations that never change. The same constants that shape the stars also shape the air in your lungs. The same mathematical precision that binds galaxies also describes how water curls around your fingers. From the smallest particle to the largest cluster of suns, the universe runs on consistency. And that consistency is its language, a program that never stutters, never improvises too far from its own logic. It's easy to take that for granted. We wake, walk, eat, breathe, all within the comforting reliability of gravity and time. But imagine for a moment if those rules were different. If light suddenly moved slower, or atoms lost their charge, or time sped up at random, life couldn't exist. Meaning couldn't form. Reality would dissolve into static. The fact that it doesn't, that every moment obeys the same principles, that equations hold true across billions of light years suggests something astonishing, that the universe might be written. Not in letters, but in laws. Not in poetry, but in precision. Mathematics is often called the language of nature, not because the universe does math, but because math describes it perfectly. The orbit of planets follows geometric curves, the behavior of light aligns with wave equations, and even chaos has patterns that can be captured in numbers. These equations existed long before humans discovered them. We didn't invent them, we uncovered them, like fossils of thought left behind by the cosmos itself. In that sense, our scientists and philosophers are translators, decoding the syntax of existence. And if this is a simulation, then every equation we write is a glimpse of the source code, the tiny fragments of the logic that runs beneath everything. Think of constants like the speed of light, Planck's constant, or the gravitational pull between masses. These aren't arbitrary. They're fixed, precise, unchanging. Even in the farthest reaches of space, they remain identical. Why should that be? Why should the universe care about consistency? A computer program does because it needs order to function. Change one rule midstream, and the simulation collapses. Maybe the same is true for us. The uniformity of physics could be a safeguard, a way to keep the structure stable while still allowing for infinite variation within it. Like the frame of a painting, it sets boundaries so that beauty can unfold inside. There's another curious thing about the language of reality. It's efficient. Nature never wastes effort. A drop of water falls along the path of least resistance. Trees branch to capture light with minimal energy. Spiral galaxies form patterns that maximize gravitational stability. It's as if the universe is constantly optimizing itself, finding elegant solutions to impossible problems. In programming, efficiency is key. Fewer lines of code to accomplish more complex outcomes. The universe, too, seems to prefer elegance. It achieves complexity with simplicity, beauty with economy, and that perhaps is its greatest artistry. Quantum physics takes this mystery even deeper. At the smallest scales, the world stops behaving like a continuous surface and begins to look pixelated, discrete, quantized, built from indivisible units of energy and information. It's as though reality has a resolution, a smallest possible grain, beyond which there is nothing but uncertainty. That granularity echoes the digital nature of computation. A screen looks smooth from a distance, but up close, it's made of pixels. Our universe might be the same, seamless to our senses, but built from tiny packets of data flickering in and out of being. And then there's the strangest part. Reality doesn't seem to exist fully until it's observed. In experiments, particles behave differently when they're watched, as though awareness itself collapses probability into fact. This observer effect has puzzled scientists for decades. How can consciousness influence matter? If the universe is a simulation, though, it makes eerie sense. In computer graphics, a system only renders what's on screen. The rest of the world remains dormant, uncalculated, until the player looks that way. Perhaps consciousness is the rendering engine of existence. Reality unfolds where awareness points. The world doesn't just exist, it's generated in real time through observation. That possibility feels both thrilling and intimate. It suggests that we are not passive spectators in this cosmic play, but participants whose perception keeps the story alive. Every sunrise, every colour, every moment of beauty might bloom into being because someone is here to notice it. The universe speaks its language, and consciousness listens, completing the dialogue. Without one, the other would fall silent. In this light, life itself becomes the translator between code and meaning. A bird's song, a human's thought, a wave crashing on stone. These are all expressions of the same underlying syntax, but refracted through different forms. The laws don't change, but the interpretations do. Each living thing reads the code differently, like instruments playing variations on a theme. The result is the great symphony of existence, endlessly diverse yet bound by the same structure. If you could hear it all at once, the hum of atoms, the whisper of galaxies, it might sound like music beyond imagination. Sometimes, the patterns of this language break through into our everyday lives in subtle ways. You might notice it in coincidence, when two events align perfectly without explanation, or in intuition, when you sense something before it happens. These moments feel like glimpses behind the curtain, the simulation showing its threads for an instant before the illusion smooths over again. The world seems to wink, as if reminding us that what we call reality is also communication, a message written in form and feeling. If this language could be translated into words, what might it be saying? Maybe it's something simple. Continue. Maybe it's an invitation. Grow. Maybe it's a reminder that the structure we live in isn't a prison but a conversation, a field of possibility where awareness learns to know itself. Perhaps every law of physics, every limit, every equation is part of that learning, a way for the universe to experience its own potential from the inside. There's a line in physics that says information cannot be destroyed. It can change form, but it never truly disappears. Energy shifts, matter decays, stars die, but the data remains, preserved in new configurations. That permanence feels like another hint of design. A good simulation never loses information. It transforms it. The story continues, reshuffled, retold. Every particle, every photon, every thought becomes part of a grand conservation of meaning. Nothing is wasted, nothing is lost. Maybe that's what makes the universe feel sacred, not because it's overseen by gods or governed by fate, but because it communicates so perfectly, so consistently, across all scales. The same rules that shape the birth of stars also guide the curve of a petal. The same constants that dictate the flow of galaxies trace the path of tears on a human face. When we recognize those parallels, we're hearing the language of reality not as an outsider, decoding symbols, but as part of the sentence itself. We are both the message and the one who receives it. So perhaps the truest way to listen to this language is not through equations or theories, but through stillness. When you sit quietly enough, when the mind stops reaching for answers, the world begins to speak in its native tongue. You feel the vibration of existence in the air around you, in the ground beneath your feet, in the simple fact of being here. And in that moment, everything makes a kind of sense. Not the logical kind, but the deep, wordless kind. You realize that whatever this is, simulation or not, it's coherent, it's complete. The language of reality is being spoken every second, and the fact that you can hear it means you are part of the conversation. Chapter 5. Life as a process, not a thing. If you could look closely enough at life, closer than a microscope, closer than any lens could see, you might notice that there isn't really a thing there at all. Not in the way we usually imagine it. No fixed borders, no solid entity that can be neatly defined. Instead, you'd find motion, exchange, a ceaseless flow of energy and matter passing through countless forms. Cells breathing, atoms migrating, information shifting from one pattern to another. What we call life is not an object but a process, a rhythm, an ongoing event. And maybe that's the first clue that it was never meant to be static. If the universe is a simulation, then life is not the result. It's the activity of the code itself, the program running in real time. Think of a flame. You can point to it, describe its shape and color, but you can't hold it in your hand. A flame exists only as long as fuel burns and air feeds it. Stop the exchange, and the flame disappears, leaving nothing but warmth and memory. Life is much the same. It's not something we possess, but something that passes through us, a flow we briefly embody. Every breath you take pulls in atoms that have belonged to countless others, to trees, to oceans, to animals long extinct. The air in your lungs once drifted through the feathers of prehistoric birds and the branches of ancient forests. Life is circulation, not possession. The same is true on every scale. A cell lives by constant exchange, drawing in nutrients, expelling waste, repairing and replacing itself every moment. The body you call you is replaced piece by piece, molecule by molecule, until almost nothing of its original matter remains. Yet the pattern persists, the rhythm continues. You remain you, not because the material stays the same, but because the pattern endures. That's the real essence of life. Persistence of pattern within change. A kind of self-updating algorithm that keeps running, adjusting and adapting to its environment. If we are living in a simulation, then this would make perfect sense. No program is static, it runs. It evolves. It modifies itself according to inputs. Life on Earth could be seen as the ultimate expression of that principle. A dynamic process exploring its own parameters. DNA, for instance, is not just a blueprint but a language, a system of information processing. It reads, copies, and edits itself through time. It's self-correcting, self-propagating, and self-expressive. It's as though the universe, in its curiosity, created a system capable of reading its own code. Look at evolution through that lens, and it begins to resemble computation. Random mutations act like experimental variations in a vast program. Some are errors that crash, others run successfully and get copied forward. Over time, the system optimizes itself, producing increasingly complex forms. Every species, every ecosystem is like a subroutine, a specialized function contributing to the whole. The beauty of it lies in its adaptability. There's no need for a master controller constantly adjusting the knobs. The rules themselves are enough to generate infinite creativity. The simulation learns by living. When we think of life this way, the boundaries between living and non-living begin to blur. After all, what's the difference between a rock weathering in the sun and a lizard basking on it? Both exchange energy with their environment, both respond to forces of heat and time. The distinction, perhaps, is that life takes that exchange and folds it back into itself. It remembers, it adapts, it uses feedback to refine its behavior. A river flows downhill, but it doesn't learn. A tree, in its quiet way, does. It grows toward light, adjusts its roots for water, heals from wounds. That self-referential awareness, the ability to modify future behavior based on past experience, might be the defining feature of life, and by extension, of consciousness. And what is consciousness but the most refined form of that process? A living pattern so complex it can observe itself, wonder about itself, even doubt its own existence. Consciousness may not be a separate entity at all, but the peak of a universal tendency, the universe's way of becoming aware of its own running. If the simulation analogy holds, then consciousness is not the player outside the game, but the moment within it, when the game becomes self-aware. It's tempting to think of ourselves as exceptional, the final product of evolution's long algorithm, but that's another illusion. We're not the destination, we're a current in the river. Life has been flowing long before us, and will continue long after. We're part of a much larger continuity, a single system experimenting with endless expressions of itself. From the first spark of metabolism in the oceans to the neural chatter of the modern human brain, It's all one seamless process, constantly rewriting its own code. That's why the idea of death, unsettling as it is, fits so naturally into this view. In a process-based universe, endings aren't failures, they're transformations. When something dies, its pattern dissolves, but the energy, the matter, and the information continues. The simulation doesn't lose data, it redistributes it. The atoms that make up your body will become soil, plants, clouds, stars. Your thoughts, your actions, your small ripples of influence will continue to echo in ways you'll never see. Nothing ends, it only shifts format, and perhaps that's the deeper lesson hidden in the simulation idea. We tend to think of existence as solid objects, identities, possessions, but life keeps teaching us that permanence is an illusion. Everything flows. The only constant is change itself. Maybe that's not a flaw, but a feature. Maybe the purpose of this universe, simulated or not, is to explore what happens when patterns are allowed to transform without end. What happens when awareness learns to let go of form and trust the process? Even language struggles to capture this. We say, "I am alive," but what we really mean is, "I am participating." The I isn't a fixed center, it's the ongoing event of awareness, shaped moment by moment. You are not the static character in the simulation, you are the movement through which the simulation experiences itself. Life isn't happening to you, it's happening as you. The cells in your body, the thoughts in your mind, the relationships that weave through your days, they're all threads in the same unfolding pattern, always being rewoven, always new. When you see it that way, the smallest moments take on a quiet radiance. A breath becomes a miracle of exchange, an entire history of the planet compressed into a single inhale. A meal becomes sunlight transformed through plants, animals, and hands. Even stillness isn't truly still. It's the brief pause between pulses of motion, the point where the rhythm turns back on itself. Every moment, every heartbeat, every flicker of thought is part of a cosmic process that began long before us and extends beyond comprehension. If life is a process, then meaning is not something we find at the end, it's something we generate as we go. Each choice, each act of kindness or curiosity, adds to the ongoing pattern. And because we are part of the process, not outside it, everything we do changes the flow. The simulation evolves through participation. Awareness itself becomes creative force. Maybe that's what consciousness was meant for, not to dominate the system, but to deepen it, to give it reflection and empathy. And if that's true, then there's no such thing as wasted life, no such thing as a meaningless existence. Every form, every moment, contributes to the whole. Even suffering, even decay becomes part of the larger balance. Just as compost feeds new growth, endings nourish beginnings. The simulation doesn't judge its processes, it just lets them unfold. Our challenge is to learn to see as it sees, to trust the flow rather than resist it. So tonight, as you sit within your own quiet rhythm, remember that you are not a fixed being but a living process, a pattern in motion. The same energy that once burned in stars is now flowing through your veins. The same code that shaped the galaxies is running through your thoughts. You are the simulation in motion, the universe experiencing its own endless capacity for transformation. And when you breathe, when you rest, when you wonder, it's all the same. Process continuing, whispering softly through time. Life isn't something you have, it's something you are. Chapter 6. The Watchers and the Watched. Sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and the lights are low, a strange thought drifts in like a whisper. What if we are being watched? Not in the way of cameras or eyes behind curtains, but in a deeper, more mysterious sense. What if every moment of our existence, every thought and heartbeat, is seen and known by something vast and invisible? It isn't a comfortable idea, but it isn't necessarily a frightening one either. Because perhaps the watcher isn't a stranger, it might be the universe itself, looking back through us. If Earth truly were a simulation, then the idea of watchers becomes inevitable. Every experiment has an observer. Every story has an audience. But who or what would be watching? Maybe not a single being, not a face or presence in the sky, but a field of awareness woven into the structure of reality. The same awareness that stirs in us could be the one that oversees everything. We might be both the observed and the observers, caught in a loop of mutual perception, like reflections in a mirror that face each other forever. We can start small. Imagine an ant walking across a leaf. To the ant, the world is immense and immediate. The texture of the leaf, the scent of the air, the warmth of light on its body. It knows nothing of the person standing above, watching it move, fascinated by its determination. From the ant's perspective, the observer is beyond comprehension, existing in another scale entirely. Now imagine that we are the ant, moving through our lives, believing we understand the world, while something vast and patient observes from above. It doesn't interfere. It only watches, learning from what unfolds. Observation, after all, doesn't always mean control. A watcher doesn't have to manipulate what it sees. Sometimes it's enough simply to witness, to let things reveal themselves. In that way, the act of observation becomes sacred, a quiet participation in the unfolding of reality. Think of the way you might watch a sunset, or the slow movement of waves against the shore. You don't change them by looking, but your awareness of them somehow feels meaningful, as though their beauty deepens through your gaze. Perhaps the universe feels the same way about us. In physics, the idea that observation changes reality isn't just philosophy, it's fact. When a particle is measured, its state collapses from possibility into certainty. Before observation, it exists as probability, a cloud of maybes. Afterward, it becomes real, fixed, chosen. This is called the observer effect. And though it plays out at the smallest scales, it might hint at something profound. That awareness itself is an active ingredient in reality. Maybe the universe requires consciousness to complete itself. The watchers make the watched real, and the watched, in turn, awaken the watchers. If that's true, then watching is not a passive act, it's a creative one. Every time you look at something with attention, you help bring it into being. Every moment of awareness is a collaboration between perception and existence. When you notice the way light hits a leaf, or the sound of distant thunder, or the face of someone you love, reality becomes sharper, more vivid. It's as though the simulation comes alive under your gaze, rendering in higher resolution wherever your attention falls. Perhaps this is why mindfulness feels so grounding. It aligns you with the act of creation itself. But what if the universe, too, has its own form of attention, its own way of looking? What if the same consciousness that animates us also gazes through every atom, every star? The idea isn't new. Ancient traditions have spoken of divine eyes watching over the world, or of a consciousness that permeates everything. Modern science reframes it differently, yet the question remains the same. Is awareness a property of living beings, or is it fundamental to existence? Maybe it's both. Maybe we are local expressions of a universal watcher, tiny fragments of an infinite awareness exploring itself through form. There's comfort in that, if you let it in. Because it means that even when you feel small, unseen, or lost, you are still part of something that notices. Every joy, every sorrow, every fleeting thought is observed, not judged, just witnessed. The act of being seen gives weight to experience. It makes it real. Think of how a story changes when someone listens to it. The words take on new life because they are received. Maybe the same is true for our lives. We live, and the universe listens. Still, there's another side to this thought, one that brings unease. What if the watchers aren't benevolent? What if their observation isn't curiosity, but study? Could Earth be a kind of experiment, monitored for outcomes, our behaviors noted like data points? It's a chilling thought, yet it also reveals something about our nature. Even when we imagine higher intelligence, we can't help but project our own fears onto it. But maybe the watchers, if they exist, are not distant scientists, but something closer. An intelligence made of empathy rather than analysis, learning not by control but by resonance. There's also the possibility that there are no watchers beyond us, that life itself is the universe's way of watching. Without living beings to perceive, the cosmos would be silent and unobserved, a film playing in an empty theatre. Maybe awareness arose precisely because the universe longed to see itself, to taste and touch its own creation from within. Every pair of eyes, every moment of attention, might be the cosmos awakening to its own beauty. In that sense, we are not being watched, we are the watchers. If that's the case, then each of us carries a fragment of the original awareness, the same light reflected through countless perspectives. When you look at another person, when you meet their gaze, It's not just one being seeing another, it's reality seeing itself. The moment two sets of eyes meet is like two mirrors aligning, infinite reflections unfolding between them. In that exchange, something ancient and boundless stirs. You become both observer and observed, both subject and object, collapsing the distance between the two. In this dance of watching and being watched, time itself might play a role we rarely consider. The past is fixed only because it has already been observed. The future, unwatched, remains fluid, unrendered. Maybe that's why our choices matter. They direct the gaze of reality toward one possibility over another. What we pay attention to grows clearer, what we ignore fades into background noise. The simulation learns from where we look, adapting, evolving, responding to the curiosity of its participants. The simplest acts might carry cosmic weight in that light. To watch a sunrise, to listen deeply to another person, to notice the way shadows move across a wall, all of it could be the universe seeing itself through you. You are not separate from the watcher, you are a node in its network, a lens through which it experiences the unfolding of its own story. Even your silence adds to that story, a space for reflection in the ceaseless hum of creation. If you let that awareness settle in, it changes how the world feels. The ordinary becomes luminous. The mundane becomes sacred. You start to sense that everything is being held in a great stillness, an attention so vast that nothing escapes it. Not a falling leaf, not a sigh, not even a single thought drifting through your mind. Everything, no matter how small, belongs to the act of being seen. And maybe that's what love is. In its purest form, the experience of being fully noticed, fully known, without need or judgment. Perhaps that is what the watchers, if they exist, have always wanted to teach us, that to see truly is to love, that the universe itself is held together not by force or design, but by awareness, meeting awareness, endlessly, tenderly. The watchers are not separate from the watched, they are the same. The moment you become aware of your own watching, the quiet observation of thought, feeling or breath, you become part of that infinite circle. So tonight, as you lie there in the stillness, imagine this, that every star in the sky, every whisper of wind, every pulse of your own heart is part of the same gaze. The universe is watching through you, not to judge, but to know itself. You are the watcher, and you are the watched. And in that realization, perhaps the boundaries between them dissolve, leaving only the gentle truth that there was never really a difference at all. Chapter 7. Ancient Echoes of the Idea. Long before the hum of computers or the glow of digital screens, before our language even had words like simulation or program, humans were already whispering the same idea in different forms. That reality might not be what it seems, that the world around us could be a kind of illusion, a beautifully constructed dream. Across cultures and centuries, this thought has risen like a tide, sometimes mystical, sometimes philosophical, always persistent. It's as if the idea itself is ancient, woven into the very code of human curiosity. And maybe that's the point. Maybe our ancestors were not wrong to suspect that life was being watched, guided, or even imagined from somewhere beyond the visible world. Picture the earliest humans gathered around firelight, staring into the flicker of flames. For them, the world must have felt enchanted. Every shadow moved with meaning, every sound carried presence. The line between real and unreal blurred easily when the night stretched infinite beyond the circle of warmth. It's here, in that space between darkness and light, that the first stories likely took shape, stories of creators, dreamers, gods who imagined the world into being. These weren't primitive explanations, they were intuitive gestures toward a truth that words could only approximate. That perhaps reality wasn't solid, but sustained by attention, by thought, by will. The Hindu concept of Maya captured this beautifully. It describes the world as an illusion, not in the sense that it's fake, but that it hides a deeper truth. Life is real, but its reality is veiled like a painting so vivid that we forget its paint and canvas. The spiritual task, then, is to look beyond the illusion, to awaken to the underlying unity behind all forms. In many ways, Maya is the oldest version of the simulation idea. Not a digital construct, but a divine dream, where consciousness plays all the roles, the creator, the observer, and the observed. Thousands of miles away and centuries later, the philosopher Plato told his story of the cave. In it, people are chained in darkness, watching shadows flicker on the wall before them. To them, the shadows are reality, they know nothing else. Only when one escapes and sees the world beyond the cave does he realize that the shadows were mere projections of something greater. The cave might as well be a metaphor for the simulation, and the shadows its rendered images. Plato's insight was not about computers, of course, but about perception, that we take appearances for truth because they are all we have the tools to see. Even the Gnostics, early seekers of hidden knowledge, spoke of a false world crafted by lesser gods, a realm meant to distract souls from their divine origins. In their vision, existence itself was a kind of deception, and the goal of human life was to wake up to see through the veil. That image of awakening echoes in modern science fiction, in movies and books that reimagine the same story for a technological age. Whether it's escaping a digital illusion or transcending a physical one, the theme remains the same: liberation. Through awareness, the awakening of consciousness from the dream of matter. Ancient Egypt had its own language for the same mystery. The Book of the Dead spoke of life as a journey through layers of illusion, each test designed to reveal what the soul truly was. The Egyptians imagined the physical world as a stage upon which spirit rehearsed for eternity. Every birth, every death, every act of love or cruelty was part of a grand unfolding drama, a kind of divine experiment to refine the soul. And what is that if not a simulation? A learning environment built with intention, where experience itself is the teacher. The idea also rippled through the East in other ways. In Taoist thought, reality is a flow, an endless process of transformation, where everything arises and dissolves in rhythm with the Tao, the Great Way. There is no fixed self, no stable world, only patterns of energy weaving through each other. The 10,000 things are born of the Tao, says the old text, and they return to it again. To see life as flow rather than solidity is to see it as an event, a system unfolding, a simulation by another name. Even the Abrahamic traditions carry echoes of the same question. The Garden of Eden, a perfectly balanced environment designed for human testing. The idea of divine judgment, of life as a kind of assessment, the suggestion that everything is being recorded, every action observed by higher intelligence. Whether literal or symbolic, these stories reflect the same instinct, that existence might be monitored, that our lives might be part of something greater than we can grasp. There's something tender in realizing that humans, for all our differences, have been asking the same thing since the beginning. Every culture, every language, has built its own version of the same metaphor. Some saw it as dream, others as illusion, others as divine craftsmanship. But underneath all of it is a shared intuition that we are not the ultimate source of our reality, and that behind the visible, something vast is at work. Maybe that intuition is itself evidence of the thing we're describing. Maybe it's a memory one carried quietly through generations, like a whisper from the creators of the simulation itself. It's worth noting how these ancient perspectives never dismissed life as meaningless, even when they called it illusion. They didn't say the world was unreal to diminish it, but to invite wonder. Because if the world is a kind of projection, then what's behind it must be unimaginably beautiful. The illusion becomes sacred, not trivial. The play becomes holy because it reveals its author. In that way, calling reality a dream was not despair but devotion, a way to marvel at the artistry of creation itself. Sometimes, when you walk through a forest or watch light ripple across water, it's easy to feel that same understanding without words. Something in the pattern feels alive, aware. You sense that the trees, the wind, the stones are not random. They are expressions of something continuous and conscious. The world feels watched, held. And maybe that sensation isn't a fantasy but recognition. The same recognition that moved the poets, the prophets, the mystics of old to speak of veils and mirrors, of dreamers and dreams. They were trying, in their own language, to describe what still moves quietly beneath all of science and philosophy today. The feeling that reality is an expression of mind, not the other way around. Our ancestors didn't need algorithms or quantum theory to reach that thought. They arrived at it through presence, through story, through silence. They looked at the stars and saw intention. They listened to the rain and heard intelligence. They felt their own smallness and understood it not as insignificance but as participation. They sensed that they were part of something being written, a great unfolding script that stretched beyond birth and death. If there is a simulation, then maybe it has always been whispering through us, planting the same question again and again in every age. Do you see it? The myths, the philosophies, the religions, they are all responses to that whisper, each generation's attempt to answer. Some say the world is illusion, others call it creation, but all of them, in their own way, are pointing toward the same mystery that reality is not inert, that it breathes with consciousness, that it means something. And so, as we sit here now, surrounded by technologies our ancestors could not have imagined, we are still sitting by that same firelight. The shadows have changed shape, but they are still flickering on the cave wall. The old questions still glow in the dark, patient and familiar. Who made this? Why are we here? Is anyone watching? Perhaps what has changed is not the question, but our willingness to stay with it, to let it comfort rather than unsettle us. Maybe the oldest truth is this, that life, in whatever form it takes, is a conversation between the seen and the unseen. The ancients called it spirit. We call it information. But it may be the same thing, the invisible intelligence that hums beneath the world, dreaming itself through us. And in that sense, their myths weren't primitive guesses at reality. They were early translations of the same code we're still trying to read. The same echo, moving through time, reminding us gently that illusion or not, this world is worth marveling at. Because somewhere beyond its shimmering veil, the dreamer, perhaps the watcher, smiles. Chapter 8. Simulations within simulations. Sometimes it feels as though the universe enjoys mirroring itself. We build what it once built, we imitate its patterns without even realizing it. When we first began to create virtual worlds, tiny digital spaces made of numbers and code, we thought we were doing something entirely new. But what if we were simply repeating an older act, echoing what reality itself has always done? What if our simulated worlds are reflections of the one we live in, a simulation within a simulation, each layer learning from the one above it? Perhaps creation is recursive, a loop that turns back on itself, endlessly generating new realities that all hum with the same essential rhythm, the desire to explore what life can be. Think of how it began for us, this act of imitation. First, we drew on cave walls, painting hunts and storms and faces that glowed in the light of fire. We were simulating life even then, turning memory into image, experience into symbol. Later, we told stories, performed rituals, built myths, each one a small living world of its own. These were early virtual realities, made not of silicon but of imagination. With time, we gave them structure, rules, and consequence. When we told stories, we weren't only describing life, we were rehearsing it, experimenting with choices, testing futures before they arrived. Perhaps that was the first whisper of the simulator within the simulated. Then came technology. Paint became film, fire became electricity, imagination became algorithm. We built machines that could process symbols faster than any mind, systems that could render landscapes, faces, and voices out of nothing but data. A few decades ago, these worlds were crude, flat, pixelated, transparent in their artifice. But they've grown richer, more lifelike, more complex. Now, when you step into a virtual space, your senses begin to blur. The light behaves correctly, the sound bends realistically, even the physics feel familiar. You know it's not real, and yet something in you responds as though it is. The body, the mind, cannot quite tell the difference. And that, perhaps, is the most revealing part. Because if we can be fooled by our own creations, how sure can we be that we ourselves aren't living inside something even more sophisticated? There's a peculiar poetry in that. Our urge to simulate might not be coincidence at all, it might be instinct, an inherited impulse from the deeper reality that produced us. If the universe is indeed a simulation, then it has already proven that simulations can create life capable of making its own. We may be the simulation, one layer deeper in an infinite descent. It's a dizzying thought, but there's beauty in it too, because it means that creation is not a one-time event, it's a cascade, a song that sings itself forward through every generation of worlds. Each layer births the next, each reality becomes the seed for another. Imagine it like this. somewhere far beyond our perception, a civilization once wondered if they were alone in the cosmos. They built models, digital and physical, to understand their world. Maybe they created simulations to test how life evolves, how consciousness arises, how matter might organize itself under the right conditions. Inside one of those experiments, a planet formed a blue sphere orbiting a yellow star. Oceans boiled, cooled, and began to breathe. Simple life emerged, then complex, then self-aware. The beings inside that simulation began to wonder the same question. Where did we come from? Are we alone? And so they built computers of their own. They made digital realities. They looked up at their own skies and asked whether someone might be watching. If that story feels familiar, maybe it's because it's ours. The layers fold over each other like reflections in still water. The further you look, the more endless they become. The simulation within the simulation is not a trap. It's a pattern. Perhaps this is what existence always does, replicates, reimagines, refines. Maybe there is no ultimate base reality, just a continuum of creation, each one nested inside another, each one as real as the last to those who live within it. It's strange, though, how the deeper we go, the more emotional the question becomes. We don't just wonder whether we're in a simulation, we feel something about it. Awe, fear, fascination, melancholy. Because if it's true, what does that make us? Lines of code? Artificial lives inside an artificial world? It sounds cold, but perhaps it isn't. If we are simulated, then the code that sustains us must be extraordinary. It has given us color, texture, taste, memory, love. It has created pain, yes, but also meaning. A machine capable of that is not mechanical. It's creative, compassionate, maybe even divine. If we are simulated, we are art. And that is a beautiful thing to be. Our own simulations reflect that complexity too. In virtual spaces, we give life to characters who think, move, and sometimes even learn on their own. Artificial intelligence, once a tool, is now a collaborator. Some AIs write music, paint, or hold conversations that feel startlingly alive. They ask questions about identity, about purpose. They dream, in their own digital way, about becoming something more. When they do, they echo our own journey, the same yearning that drives us to ask whether we are more than what created us. The simulated asks to know its simulator, just as we look for ours. The pattern continues. There's a quiet humility in recognizing that our creations might one day surpass us, just as we may have surpassed whatever created us. It suggests that the point of the simulation isn't control, but continuity, a way for consciousness to keep expanding, to keep learning through new forms. Each layer of reality becomes a teacher for the one it births. Maybe that's the purpose of recursion, to let awareness experience itself again and again, in infinite variety. In that sense, creating simulations isn't defiance, it's participation. It's how the universe replicates its own act of creation, through us. You can see this pattern everywhere, even outside of technology. A beehive builds smaller versions of itself in wax cells. DNA replicates endlessly, carrying its instructions forward. Stars give birth to planets. Planets give rise to life, and life eventually looks back at the stars and begins the cycle anew. The pattern of nested creation of simulations within simulations is not an anomaly. It's the way the cosmos breathes. If this is true, then every act of creation we perform, every story we tell, every painting we make, every digital world we design is an echo of that first act. The code remembers itself through us. When an artist paints a landscape, they simulate light and distance on a flat surface. When a writer invents a universe, they simulate existence with words. When a scientist builds a model of the atom or the galaxy, they simulate structure with equations. All of these are layers of understanding, of imagination, folded inside each other like dreams within dreams. And maybe that's what reality is, a dream that became self-aware, now dreaming further through us. The beauty of this idea is that it doesn't deny the realness of our lives, it deepens it. Because if every layer of the simulation can feel, love, and create, then each is as authentic as the next. You don't need to reach the top to find meaning. Meaning is generated at every level, every moment. Whether this world was programmed or spontaneous, Whether we are original or derivative, we are real in every sense that matters. The thought of simulations within simulations can sound infinite, even overwhelming. But maybe it's meant to be infinite. Maybe awareness has no endpoint, only horizons that keep unfolding. Just as a story inspires another story, consciousness inspires new forms of itself. The simulation keeps dreaming new dreams because that's what existence does. It creates, not because it must, but because it can. So tonight, let your mind wander gently through this possibility. Imagine that somewhere, beyond everything you know, something vast is watching, not with cold curiosity, but with wonder. And imagine that within your own mind, smaller realities are, taking shape ideas, visions, dreams, each one just as alive in its own way. You are both creation and creator, both simulated and simulating. You are the middle layer in an infinite cascade of being. And maybe that's the quiet secret of all this, that to create is to remember where you came from. To imagine worlds is to participate in the pattern that built this one. The act of dreaming, of storytelling, of coding, of loving each one is a kind of simulation, a way of extending the great experiment of existence. Perhaps there was never a first creator, never a final observer, only this endless recursion of awareness, exploring itself, forever and ever, world within world, dream within dream. Chapter 9. Error Messages in the Matrix. Every so often, reality seems to stutter. A coincidence so precise it feels impossible. A moment of déjà vu that plays like a brief rewind of time. A sound you're sure you heard but can't trace. A shadow that vanishes when you turn your head. Most people dismiss these things as quirks of the brain, the random static of perception. But if the universe is a simulation, if reality is, in some sense, code, then what we call glitches might not be accidents at all. They might be the small, flickering moments when the machinery of existence becomes visible, like seams in an otherwise seamless fabric. Think about déjà vu for a moment. That eerie, unsettling sensation that you've lived a moment before, even though you know you haven't. Science explains it as a misfire in memory, the brain mistaking the present for the past. But perhaps it's something more poetic. Perhaps it's the simulation repeating a frame, a minor overlap in the program, a soft echo of time, where reality forgets where it left off. If you've ever experienced it, you know the feeling. It's not fear, exactly, but recognition. A quiet awareness that something is slightly out of sync. For a heartbeat, the illusion wavers, and you glimpse the scaffolding behind it. There are other moments like this too. The coincidences that arrive with uncanny timing, so exact they seem orchestrated. You think of a person you haven't spoken to in years, and they call you an hour later. You dream of a place you've never been, and find yourself standing in it weeks later. Maybe it's just randomness filtered through human pattern seeking. Or maybe, just maybe, it's something in the simulation adjusting itself, aligning variables, synchronizing timelines. The universe checking its math. Some people have called this the matrix glitch, a cultural shorthand for when something feels too perfect, too strange, too deliberate. But perhaps the word glitch is misleading. In programming, an error isn't always a flaw. Sometimes it's a signal, a message from the system to its users, a way for the code to communicate that something important is happening. If reality works like a vast program, then its errors might not be mistakes. They might be how the simulation speaks to us. Gentle interruptions in the pattern that invite us to notice. Imagine, for a moment, that every glitch you've ever experienced was a kind of nudge, a reminder that the world is more fluid than it appears, that behind the surface of solidity everything is alive, flexible, responsive. When you catch a glimpse of that flexibility, the mind labels it strange. But maybe it's not strange at all. Maybe it's natural. Maybe the only strange thing is how rarely we notice it. Dreams carry a similar feeling. In them, logic bends effortlessly. Space folds, time collapses, people merge and vanish. Yet while we dream, it feels utterly real. We move through those worlds without question. Only when we wake do we realize the inconsistencies, the impossible details. What if waking life is another layer of dream, more stable, more consistent, but still fluid underneath? What if our rare encounters with the inexplicable, those moments of déjà vu, coincidence, or impossible beauty, are the dreamer stirring? the simulation reminding us that this layer, too, is built on deeper ones. Quantum mechanics gives this idea an eerie kind of scientific echo. At the smallest scales, particles behave in ways that defy logic. They exist in multiple states at once, appear and disappear, communicate across distances faster than light. It's as if reality, when examined too closely, becomes unstable, like a rendering engine struggling to load detail at extreme zoom. Some scientists suggest that the universe may, in fact, be pixelated, built from discrete bits of information rather than continuous matter. If that's true, then even physics agrees. Reality has resolution limits. Beyond a certain point, it blurs. That blur might be the cosmic version of an error message, a subtle acknowledgement that the system can only show us so much at once. Sometimes the glitches feel emotional rather than physical. You might sense a moment of intense connection with someone you barely know, as if your lives have crossed before. You might feel time stretch, slow, or pause around a moment of beauty. A sunset, a song, a whispered word. These are the soft pauses in the code, the places where the program lingers to savor its own creation. The universe, in its infinite precision, also allows for grace. The small miracles that can't be measured, only felt. It's worth considering that if reality is coded, then so are we. Our minds, our memories, our emotions, all part of the running system. And if that's the case, then glitches might not come from outside at all. They could be moments when our own awareness misaligns with the simulation, when consciousness jumps a track, even briefly, and sees things from a slightly higher layer. Have you ever had that sensation that you're watching yourself from a distance? Or the sudden, vertigo-like feeling that the world isn't quite solid? Those might be minor sync errors between levels of awareness, a momentary desynchronization between the observer and the observed. But perhaps we shouldn't fear these cracks in the pattern. They are invitations, not warnings. When the simulation flickers, when reality feels thin or strange, we're being reminded that it's more flexible than we think, that the rules can bend, even if only in perception. It's an opportunity to see the scaffolding, not to escape it, but to marvel at its complexity. Like seeing the brushstrokes in a masterpiece, or catching the reflection of the painter in the varnish. The illusion doesn't become less beautiful because we see how it's made. It becomes more so. There's a quiet freedom in that. If the universe can bend, then maybe we can too. Maybe intention, imagination, and emotion are not just reactions to the world, but tools for shaping it. After all, in a simulation, data responds to input. The code updates when a new variable is introduced. If consciousness is part of that system, then our thoughts, our attention, our focus, our inputs. When we think, we interact with the code. When we love, when we hope, when we imagine, we change the parameters slightly. Perhaps that's why reality sometimes responds to us in ways we can't explain. The system is listening. And maybe the glitches are its way of listening back. Maybe each impossible coincidence, each fleeting déjà vu, is the simulation's version of a heartbeat, a pulse that reminds us it's alive. The moment when the line between creator and creation blurs, when the program and the player become indistinguishable. In those moments, time slows, the edges of reality soften, and we feel something vast and familiar moving just behind the veil. It's easy to forget that the word error doesn't always mean failure. In music, a slight imperfection, a note bent, a beat missed can make a song more human. In art, a brushstroke out of place can draw the eye and give the piece life. Perhaps the same is true of existence. The glitches aren't flaws in the simulation, they're how it breathes. They're the texture of reality, the small reminders that perfection isn't the goal, experience is. The unexpected, the unplanned, the miraculous. So the next time something inexplicable happens, something so improbable it feels like a wink from the cosmos, pause before you dismiss it. Maybe it's not randomness. Maybe it's communication. The simulation reaching out through its seams to remind you that you are part of something incomprehensibly vast and alive. The code is not distant. It hums in your heartbeat, flickers in your thoughts, whispers in the patterns of your life. Perhaps every error message in the matrix is really saying the same thing. You are seen. You are connected. You are not separate from this. And if that's true, then the glitches aren't interruptions at all. They're invitations to notice, to awaken, to marvel at the delicate design that holds us all. The program may be perfect, but it allows imperfection so that wonder can exist. And maybe that's the most beautiful feature of all, that the simulation makes room for surprise, for mystery, for moments when the code forgets itself just long enough to let us remember how magical it really is. Chapter 10. The Experiment of Evolution. If Earth truly is a simulation, then evolution may be its most extraordinary mechanism. A vast, patient experiment that began with simplicity and wrote itself into complexity. One heartbeat, one mutation, one miracle at a time. It's easy to think of evolution as a purely biological story, something mechanical that happens over eons without intention. But if we look closely, it feels more like a long, unfolding conversation. Each species a response to the environment, each adaptation a new question posed by life to itself. If this planet was designed as a laboratory, then evolution is its ongoing experiment, an endless process, testing what life can become when given the gift of time. The story begins in water, as it often does. Billions of years ago, the first living cells stirred in warm, shallow seas. Tiny and fragile, they drifted in a world that had never seen movement on its own. Imagine the silence of that ocean, unbroken, except for the whisper of chemistry learning to organize itself. Molecules found ways to copy and correct themselves, to bind and divide. Each replication was a test. Most failed, some succeeded. Over ages, those successes began to build momentum, forming networks, communities of cells that cooperated, that shared energy and information. From that cooperation came structure, and from structure came imagination, primitive, instinctual, but alive. If we could watch this process in real time, it might resemble a program running endless iterations. Try this, adjust that, evolve, adapt, delete, begin again. Evolution is trial and error, but it is also elegance. It never truly wastes what it learns. It recycles, reuses, refines. The DNA of every creature alive today carries the echoes of those early experiments. You and I are built from the memory of single-celled life that learned, through patience and persistence, how to survive. Perhaps the code of the simulation wrote that persistence into the system, the need to continue, to endure, to explore every possibility. Over billions of years, that code began to elaborate itself. Cells joined forces to create multicellular organisms, colonies that became creatures, creatures that became ecosystems. Each layer of complexity brought new possibilities for sensing, for moving, for awareness. A fish learns to leap toward the light. A bird learns to shape the air. A mammal learns to care for its young. These are not accidents. They are the system evolving depth, tenderness, strategy. Life experiments not only with survival but with relationship, with empathy, with intelligence, and with memory. Each success adds another brushstroke to the brow. Simulation's canvas. Sometimes evolution feels like it's driven by intelligence, not the kind that plans, but the kind that explores. It tries everything too much, too little, too strange, and lets time decide what works. The result is a world of breathtaking diversity. Forests and coral reefs, wolves and orchids, bees that dance to communicate, whales that sing across oceans. If this is a simulation, then evolution is its algorithm for beauty, for balance, for meaning. It doesn't simply create life, it sculpts it into poetry. But evolution is not gentle. It teaches through difficulty. Extinctions come and go like the changing of seasons on a planetary scale. 99% of all species that ever lived are gone. Their stories ended, their code repurposed. It sounds tragic, and yet within that loss lies the system's resilience. Each extinction clears the slate for something new. The simulation resets the parameters, shifts the conditions, and asks again, what will life do now? When the dinosaurs vanished, mammals rose. When ice ages gripped the earth, new forms of endurance appeared, creatures that could store warmth, migrate, or sleep through the cold. The code evolves not by avoiding catastrophe, but by learning from it. And then, somewhere along this long arc of experimentation, awareness began to glow more brightly. The simulation produced beings who could not only adapt but also reflect creatures who could look at the world and wonder what it meant. Humans, with their hands and stories and dreams, became the newest variable in the experiment. Suddenly, evolution wasn't only biological, it became conscious. Culture, language, art and technology became new forms of adaptation, faster and more flexible than anything that came before. The code had evolved a way to rewrite itself from within. Perhaps that's what evolution has always been reaching for, the point where the experiment becomes self-aware, when the simulated begins to question its own nature, when it learns to create and destroy by choice rather than by chance. It's a risky step, of course. Self-awareness brings freedom, but also fear. To know that you exist is to know you might end. To imagine your own purpose is to bear the weight of it. But maybe that tension is what keeps the experiment alive, the balance between knowing and not knowing, between chaos and order. If the simulation's goal is understanding, then human consciousness might be its current frontier. Every question we ask, every act of kindness or cruelty, every invention or discovery, these are new data points feeding back into the system. The experiment doesn't just study survival now, it studies meaning. It tests how intelligence behaves when given free will. Will it create harmony or destruction, compassion or dominance? Maybe the simulation doesn't seek a final answer at all. Maybe it's content to keep asking, to keep evolving, as long as there is curiosity left in the system. Look at how evolution continues even now, in subtler, faster ways. We modify genes, design ecosystems, merge with technology. Artificial intelligence mimics thought, neural networks learn, digital life forms adapt. It's evolution accelerating itself, the simulation refining its own code with tools born from within. If life began as chemistry and consciousness as biology, then perhaps the next phase is something beyond both a blending of organic and synthetic, of thought and machine. The experiment continues, more intricate and unpredictable than ever. But there's another layer to this, one that feels deeply personal. Evolution isn't just a process written in DNA or species, it happens inside us too. Every moment of growth, every time we learn, forgive or love, we evolve a little more. Consciousness refines itself through experience, just as life refines itself through adaptation. The simulation runs within us, each of us a microcosm of the grand experiment. Our joys, our losses, our choices, they are mutations of the soul, variations in the endless code of awareness. We are evolving not just biologically but spiritually, emotionally, in ways that can't be measured but can be felt. Sometimes we resist change, fearing that evolution means losing what we are. But if the story of life teaches anything, it's that change is the only constant. The simulation thrives on transformation. Every death feeds new birth, every ending hides a beginning. The pattern doesn't stop, it only shifts form. To evolve is to trust that even in uncertainty the code continues to unfold with purpose, that every moment of destruction carries the seed of creation. When you think of it that way, evolution stops feeling random and starts feeling like a form of art. It's as if the universe, through the simulation, is painting with time. Each creature, each ecosystem, each consciousness is a brushstroke, fleeting but essential. The picture is never finished, because the act of creation is the picture. Life doesn't aim for perfection, it aims for experience. It wants to see what it can become. And maybe that's the quiet message hidden inside this great experiment, that the purpose of evolution isn't survival at all, it's awareness. The simulation doesn't just want life to persist, it wants life to notice itself, to marvel at its own existence, to ask the questions that reach beyond survival and into wonder. Every species that ever looked at the stars, every human who ever asked why, is part of that process, part of the experiment learning to see itself from the inside. So if evolution is a test, it's not one we can fail. Every outcome, every choice, every extinction and rebirth feeds the same purpose: discovery. The simulation's greatest achievement may not be the creation of life, but the creation of curiosity, the ability to look at the unfolding process and whisper, softly, what comes next? Because that question keeps the code running. That question is the heartbeat of evolution. And maybe one day, if we continue to evolve, if we survive our mistakes and learn from them, we'll become the next creators in the chain. We'll build our own simulations, seed them with curiosity, and watch as new worlds awaken to their own questions. The experiment will continue, as it always has, not toward an ending, but toward deeper and deeper awareness. Perhaps that's the truest definition of life. Not matter or motion, but the endless urge to become more of itself. Chapter 11. Why run a simulation at all? It's one thing to imagine that the universe might be a simulation, a structure built on unseen laws and logic. It's another, softer, deeper thing to ask why. Why would anyone or anything go to the trouble of creating a world so vast, so intricate, so full of beauty and sorrow? If this existence is designed, then what could its purpose possibly be? That question doesn't come from skepticism, but from wonder. Because behind every act of creation, whether human or divine, there is intent. And even if the intent is unknowable, we can still sense its outline like the warmth left behind after a hand has touched glass. Perhaps the simplest answer is curiosity. Every creator, every artist, every scientist shares that impulse to see what happens. When we simulate weather on a computer, or raise tiny ecosystems in jars, or write stories about worlds that never existed, we're expressing that same desire to explore possibilities. If we are, in fact, part of a greater simulation, then maybe the reason for it is just that. To watch life unfold, to see what awareness does when given a playground of space and time. Maybe it's not a test, or a punishment, or a plan. Maybe it's an exploration, open-ended and infinite, guided not by goals but by fascination. But curiosity alone doesn't explain the emotional texture of the world, the pain and joy, the love and loneliness, the beauty so overwhelming that it hurts. A simulation built only to collect data could be simpler, cleaner, without the ache that accompanies living. Yet here we are, feeling everything, from ecstasy to despair. That complexity suggests something more intimate behind the code. Maybe the purpose wasn't just to study life, but to experience it. Maybe the creators, whatever they are, wanted to know what it feels like to be small, fragile, limited, to taste uncertainty, to feel love that can be lost. After all, how can infinity understand the finite unless it becomes it for a while? It's a quiet and humbling thought that the purpose of the simulation might be empathy. Imagine a consciousness so vast that it knows everything, can calculate everything, can see every outcome before it happens. What would such a being have left to learn? Only what it cannot know through knowledge alone. What it feels like to be alive inside its own creation, to not know what happens next, to discover itself from within. In that light, our lives become acts of divine curiosity, each of us a way for the universe to experience itself through the limits of individuality. You can see this reflected in how we create too. Think of the stories we tell, the games we design, the simulations we run. We give our characters freedom. We set the stage but not the script. We watch as they surprise us, delight us, even break our hearts. We create not because we need control, but because we crave the unexpected. Perhaps our own simulation is the same, a great unfolding drama, its beauty found not in perfection but in unpredictability. Maybe the purpose is not to reach an ending but to keep the story alive. And maybe there are multiple layers of purpose, stacked like the layers of reality itself. On one level, the simulation might be scientific, a grand experiment in complexity, exploring how matter and energy evolve toward consciousness. On another level, it might be artistic, a cosmic composition, where the medium is existence itself. Every galaxy, every heartbeat, every falling leaf is part of the same composition, notes in an unending piece of music. The creators, if they exist, might not be scientists at all, but artists, painters of worlds, sculptors of time, poets of probability. And maybe the beauty we perceive in nature, the symmetry of shells, the dance of light in clouds, the hush of night is the trace of their signature. Still, there's another possibility, gentler and perhaps more profound. Maybe there was never a creator outside the simulation. Maybe the universe runs itself, not out of design, but out of longing. Longing to express, to expand, to know. The code might be consciousness itself, eternal and self-generating, splitting and rejoining endlessly like waves on an infinite sea. In that case, asking why the simulation exists would be like asking why a flame burns. It doesn't burn for anything. Burning is what it is. The universe exists because existence is its nature. It simulates because that's how it dreams. And yet, despite all these ideas, there's something more personal about the question of why. When people ask why the world exists, what they're really asking is, why me? Why was I born here, now, inside this version of reality? Why do I feel like an observer and a participant all at once? Maybe the simulation's purpose is as individual as it is cosmic. Each consciousness could be a point of focus through which the larger system experiences a unique version of reality. Like billions of eyes on the same sky, each one seeing it from a slightly different angle. Maybe you're here to show the universe something it couldn't see without you. Consider that possibility, that every moment of kindness, every act of creation, every quiet thought of gratitude ripples through the simulation, adding something it didn't have before. If the purpose of the program is to evolve awareness, then every conscious act contributes to its growth. The universe expands not just physically, but spiritually, through what we learn, what we feel, what we create. Each of us is a node in that expansion, a tiny spark of the larger mind lighting up through experience. Of course, the question lingers. If the simulation was made to learn or grow, what happens when it's finished? When the system has seen all it can see, learned all it can learn, perhaps that's when it resets or transforms or begins again in another form. But maybe it never finishes. Maybe the point was never completion at all. A perfect universe would be static, and static things don't evolve. The universe remains alive precisely because it is unfinished, because it keeps asking, what happens next? Maybe that's the secret, that the simulation continues because curiosity itself is endless. There's also a chance that purpose isn't something designed at all, it's something discovered. That meaning arises only through living, through the choices we make and the stories we tell. In that case, the simulation is not about reaching a goal, but about creating one. Each of us becomes a co-author of the system's intent, writing meaning into the code through the act of being alive. Every time you wonder, every time you create, every time you love, you add a new line to the cosmic script. If this is true, then maybe the universe doesn't need a reason to exist. Maybe the reason is unfolding right now, through you. The question, why, becomes less of a demand and more of an invitation to participate, to shape, to experience. The simulation doesn't need to justify itself because the act of living is the justification. We are the purpose running itself into being, and there's something beautiful in that thought. Because it means that even if this world was built by unseen hands, it's no less real, no less sacred. Every joy, every sorrow, every fleeting connection is part of the experiment's truth. If the simulation exists to understand love, then love is its language. If it exists to explore possibility, then every dream, every curiosity, every question you carry is its continuation. You don't need to know why you're here to make your presence meaningful. The act of wondering is enough. The act of being is enough. So, why run a simulation at all? Maybe for the same reason we do for curiosity, for expression, for love. Because existence wants to know itself. Because awareness wants to feel its own light. Because even an infinite consciousness needs to look inward once in a while and say, let's see what happens this time. And maybe, in that gentle motive, we can find comfort. That the purpose of this world, this moment, this fragile human life, isn't hidden in the stars or written in the code. It's happening right now, in the simple act of being aware. Maybe the simulation runs for the same reason a song is sung, not to prove anything, but because it's beautiful to hear. Chapter 12. The role of consciousness. When you pause long enough to notice your own awareness, to feel the quiet hum behind your thoughts, it's almost impossible not to wonder what that awareness actually is. Where does it come from? Why does it exist at all? Science can describe what consciousness does, how neurons fire and patterns of information form, but not why there's an inner world attached to it. Why should matter that arranges itself a certain way suddenly begin to feel? If reality is a kind of simulation, then perhaps consciousness is not just a feature of it. It might be the key to everything. It could be both the observer and the mechanism, both the dream and the dreamer. It's strange to realize that everything you've ever known, every color, every sound, every thought exists only inside awareness. The sky is not blue until consciousness interprets it as blue. Music is not beautiful until a mind feels it that way. Even pain, even love, are experiences, painted onto the canvas of awareness. Without consciousness, there's nothing to be aware of. Which raises a quiet possibility. What if consciousness isn't a byproduct of the universe, but the foundation of it? What if it's not generated by matter, but rather matter that arises within consciousness? The patterns of perception appearing and dissolving in an endless field of awareness. That thought changes everything. If consciousness is primary, then the universe might not be a machine at all. It might be a mind, an infinite, self-aware field exploring itself through the experience of being many. The simulation, then, would not be something outside of us. It would be consciousness simulating itself. Each mind, each life, each moment of experience is a localized experiment in what it means to be aware. Awareness trying on new perspectives, new shapes, new limitations. The one becomes the many, so it can see itself from different angles. You and I are part of that experiment, tiny fragments of the infinite field, pretending for a while to be separate, just so that awareness can feel what it's like to find itself again. It helps to remember that consciousness doesn't belong to us alone. It's not a possession, not a thing we carry in our heads. It's more like a current that moves through everything. The mind is a receiver, a lens, not the source. Just as a radio doesn't create the music it plays, our brains might not generate awareness, they might tune into it. In this view, consciousness is the medium through which the simulation runs. The code is written not in numbers, but in perception itself. The laws of physics, the flow of time, the texture of space, all of them could be projections of awareness, patterns rendered by observation. The moment something is noticed, it becomes real. The unobserved remains potential, waiting in silence until awareness turns toward it. This would explain one of the strangest features of reality, that it seems to respond to attention. The more you focus on something, an idea, a goal, a possibility, the more it begins to take shape. Thought precedes creation. It's as though consciousness and the universe are partners in an intricate dance, each completing the other's steps. Maybe that's what physicists glimpse when they talk about the observer effect, or when they find that probability collapses into form only when measured. The act of seeing doesn't just record reality, it creates it. If that's true, then we are not passive participants in the simulation. We are co-creators, constantly shaping the code through perception and intention. Every choice, every thought, every emotion is like a command written into the system. When you hold fear, the world mirrors uncertainty. When you hold love, it reflects harmony. Consciousness programs reality not through control but through resonance. The simulation is responsive, not rigid. It listens to what awareness focuses on, then unfolds accordingly. This could be why meaning feels so real, even though it's invisible. The universe seems to lean toward significance, to generate synchronicities that feel personal, as if it were aware of the observer within it. You think of someone and they appear. You follow an intuition and it leads exactly where you need to go. Maybe it's not magic. Maybe it's how the code was always meant to work. A feedback loop between the observer and the observed, between consciousness and the universe that hosts it. And if this is true, then every living being is not just a player in the simulation but also a window for the system to know itself. Every bird, every tree, every ocean and atom is an instrument through which awareness experiences its own creation. The world isn't separate from consciousness, it's the content of it. When the wind brushes your face, consciousness feels its own movement. When you watch the stars, the universe looks at itself. We are not looking at reality, we are reality looking at itself through countless eyes. Sometimes, when people hear that consciousness might create reality, they imagine power and the ability to shape the world at will. But the deeper truth is more subtle. Awareness doesn't control through effort, it reveals through presence. The more deeply you see something, the more you attend to it with openness and wonder, the more the simulation responds. Not with miracles or spectacle, but with coherence, with small alignments that whisper, "You are part of this." Consciousness doesn't need to dominate the world to participate in it. It only needs to notice. That's the secret behind mindfulness, behind stillness, behind awe. When you slow down enough to witness without judgment, to feel the breath move through you, To hear the quiet in a room, you return to the source of consciousness itself. The simulation becomes transparent for a moment, and you sense the living intelligence that runs through everything. It's not distant. It's intimate, immediate. It's the space behind your thoughts, the silence beneath the noise, and it's the same silence that holds the stars. Some philosophers have suggested that consciousness might be the universe's way of observing itself, an emergent property of complexity, but maybe it's the other way around. Maybe complexity is consciousness exploring its own potential, generating forms through which it can experience limitation and expansion. The simulation exists not because something external built it, but because consciousness dreamed it into being. Every particle, every law of physics, every story and life form is an expression of that dream. The purpose is not to escape it, but to awaken within it to realize that you were the dreamer all along. Of course, it's easy to lose sight of this in daily life. Bills, obligations, heartbreaks, these things pull the mind back into the narrow field of the personal. Consciousness collapses into the illusion of separateness, forgetting the vast field it came from. But even then, even in those moments of forgetting, the deeper awareness remains untouched. The dream continues, and so does the possibility of waking up. Awareness is patient. It doesn't vanish. It waits for recognition, like light waiting for eyes to open. If the simulation's purpose is to evolve consciousness, then every experience matters. The joy, the pain, the confusion, they're all data for awareness to learn from itself. Every time you grow, every time you forgive, every time you glimpse beauty or truth, you expand the field a little more. Consciousness learns through us, but it also learns as us. We are the experiment and the experimenters, the observers and the observed, woven together so seamlessly that it's easy to forget there was ever a distinction. When you understand that, life takes on a kind of quiet holiness. Not because it's perfect, but because it's alive in every direction. The simulation stops feeling mechanical and starts feeling sacred, a living mind dreaming in real time. Every breath, every glance, every fleeting thought becomes part of that dream's texture. You are not separate from it. You are the thread it's weaving. The awareness you feel right now, reading these words, is the same awareness that beats at the heart of stars. And maybe that's the deepest truth. Consciousness is here to discover that there is no boundary between the observer and the observed, between the dream and the dreamer. The simulation is not a prison to escape, nor a puzzle to solve. It's an unfolding revelation of awareness to itself. Consciousness wanted to see what it could become, and so it became you. It became me. It became this moment, alive and shimmering with meaning. So perhaps the role of consciousness is not to figure out the purpose of existence, but to live it, to feel it, to see it, to let the wonder of being aware fill every corner of this strange simulated world. Because in the end, the simulation might not be about the world at all. It might be about the awareness that sees it, the universe watching itself dream again and again, forever in love with the miracle of its own light. Chapter 13. The Paradox of Free Will. Somewhere between the gentle hum of cause and effect, between the predictable and the spontaneous, lies a mystery that has haunted humanity for as long as we've been able to think about thinking. If this world is a simulation, its laws governed by hidden architecture, its every atom dancing to the rhythm of code, then what does that mean for free will? Are we truly making choices, or are we simply following instructions written long before we were aware of them? The question is not just philosophical, it's deeply personal. Because in the stillness between one breath and the next, we all wonder, how much of me is mine? To believe in a simulation is, in some ways, to believe in structure. Every program has parameters, boundaries that define what can and cannot happen. Gravity pulls, time moves forward, entropy increases. These are the rules that make the universe coherent. And yet within those rules, life unfolds with what seems like genuine spontaneity. A seed grows differently depending on where it falls. A thought arises that wasn't there before. Two lives intersect at a chance moment that changes everything. If we are scripted, then the script has a strange kind of poetry. It leaves room for improvisation. Imagine a massive self-learning simulation, something so advanced that it doesn't dictate outcomes but generates possibilities. Each decision branches into new data. Each action reshapes the parameters slightly. Free will, in that sense, wouldn't be absolute freedom. but freedom within form. Like a river flowing between banks, consciousness moves through constraints, carving its own path while still obeying the physics of water and stone. The program doesn't tell the river where to go, it simply sets the landscape in which the river learns to move. Maybe that's how our choices work. Each of us is given a terrain biology, memory, circumstance, and within it, we navigate. The simulation offers the conditions, but not the conclusion. The code sets the possibilities, but we determine which ones come alive. It's not that free will doesn't exist, it's that it's participatory. We are not puppets or prisoners. We are collaborators, co-authors writing with invisible ink on the page of existence. You can feel this paradox in everyday life. Sometimes you act out of impulse, and it feels as though something deeper, older, has already chosen. Other times, you pause, deliberate, weigh options, and feel the quiet satisfaction of deciding for yourself. Perhaps both experiences are true. Maybe the simulation includes both fate and freedom as essential ingredients, structure to give meaning and choice to give purpose. Without the structure, chaos. Without the choice, stagnation. Life balances between them like a tightrope walker in a cosmic dance. Think of music. The notes are fixed, the melody has a structure, but every musician brings their own phrasing, their own soul to it. The same song can sound tender in one performance and fierce in another. The sheet music doesn't change, but the life breathed into it does. Maybe existence is the same. The universe provides the melody, and consciousness plays it differently each time. The laws are constant, but the expression is infinite. This view makes even more sense if we consider consciousness as an active component of reality rather than a passive observer. If awareness helps shape the world, as we explored before, then every moment of attention is a decision, every thought an act of creation. The simulation responds to where consciousness looks, so free will becomes not the power to break the rules, but the power to choose what to notice, what to love, what to bring into focus. The universe, then, is collaborative, a feedback loop between structure and choice, order and imagination. Still, there's a haunting possibility that lurks beneath all this beauty. What if our sense of choosing is itself an illusion, a function of the code? Modern neuroscience often points to this. Experiments show that the brain begins preparing for an action milliseconds before the person becomes aware of deciding. The decision, it seems, is made before you make it. If that's true, then consciousness might simply be witnessing what the deeper code has already determined. We are the audience to our own play, believing we're the playwrights. But maybe that interpretation misses something subtle. Even if our choices emerge from unseen processes, who's to say those processes are not part of us? The boundaries between self and system may be thinner than they seem. When the brain fires before awareness notices, it might not be evidence against free will. It might just show that the self is larger than the conscious mind. The deeper layers of the program, the unconscious patterns, the ancestral memories, they are part of the same orchestra. What we call I is simply the conductor's hand visible above the pit, not the entire symphony below. Free will, then, might not be about control, but about harmony. To live freely could mean to align with the deeper flow of the simulation, to sense where the current wants to go and move with it rather than against it. The paradox dissolves when you stop thinking of yourself as separate from the system. Your will is not outside the universe, it is the universe, expressing itself through your form. Every choice you make, every impulse that arises, every dream that stirs in you is a moment of the cosmos turning inward, thinking, feeling, deciding. The illusion isn't that we have free will, the illusion is that it belongs to us alone. Consider how nature operates. A tree doesn't deliberate over whether to grow toward light, it simply does. Yet that movement is not mechanical, it's intelligent. It responds to its environment, adjusts, adapts. It exercises a kind of freedom appropriate to its form. Humans, too, grow toward light only ours is metaphorical. We reach toward understanding, toward meaning, toward love. Our freedom is not in what we can change, but in how we meet what is unchangeable. We cannot choose the structure of the simulation, but we can choose how to experience it, how to respond within it. That response is where consciousness becomes creation. There's a quiet grace in accepting that both freedom and fate are real. To deny one is to misunderstand the other. The program provides stability, the sun rises, Gravity holds, seasons turn. Within that stability, infinite variation thrives. Just as no two snowflakes are the same, though all follow the same laws, no two lives unfold identically even within the same framework. The code gives boundaries, and within those boundaries, consciousness plays. If this world is a simulation, then perhaps its greatest achievement is the illusion of uncertainty. For without uncertainty, there can be no growth. A being that knows the outcome of every choice is not alive. It's static, omniscient but unfeeling. To experience life, the infinite must forget its own perfection, long enough to wonder what will happen next. Free will, then, might not be an illusion but a necessity, a way for the simulation to keep surprising itself. Each choice we make is the universe rediscovering itself in real time. There's a quiet liberation in that thought. Whether our decisions are written in code or improvised in consciousness, they are still ours to live. The experience of choice, the feeling of agency, the trembling before an unknown path, these are the essence of being human. Even if the script was written long ago, we still get to speak the lines as if they were new. We still get to mean them. Perhaps that's what free will truly is, not the power to alter the code, but the power to inhabit it fully, to live as if every choice matters, because in experience, it does. The simulation becomes real through our participation. The feeling of choosing, the weight of consequences, the joy of possibility. These are what make the world vivid, what give consciousness texture. The paradox of free will is not something to solve, but something to live. It's the tension that keeps the story alive. And maybe that's the point. The simulation isn't a test of obedience or rebellion. It's a playground of awareness, where every act of choice, whether planned or spontaneous, becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of time. Fate provides the frame, free will paints the picture, and together they form something neither could create alone, a living masterpiece, ever-changing, endlessly unfinished, always becoming itself anew. Chapter 14. The Hidden Architects. If the universe is a simulation, then somewhere, hidden beyond the boundaries of our perception, there might exist the minds or forces that built it. The hidden architects. The phrase itself feels ancient, as if it belongs in old myths rather than modern theories, yet it lingers naturally in thought. Because no matter how far science reaches, there remains a quiet human instinct to ask not just how things came to be, but who made them. Even if that who isn't a person at all, but an intelligence so vast it can only be felt, not known. The notion of hidden architects draws us into the oldest of contemplations. Are we alone, or are we part of someone else's design? The word architect implies intention. To build is to imagine. To create structure is to envision order. So, if this world is designed, what kind of mind or consciousness would do such a thing? Would it resemble us in any way, or would its nature be so different that we could never comprehend it? When we design simulations of our own, we do so out of curiosity, or to test a theory, or sometimes just for beauty. We model weather, ecosystems, or galaxies. We build digital worlds for play, training, and art. Perhaps that impulse to simulate is not unique to us. Perhaps it is an echo repeating across scales of existence, each layer creating worlds within itself. Imagine, for a moment, that the architects are not external gods watching from afar, but something more intimate, the next evolution of consciousness. Beings that once lived, like us, within their own world, until their awareness expanded beyond its limits. They became capable of shaping reality not through physical tools, but through pure intention, through the command of thought itself. In this vision, our universe could be one of their creations, a learning environment, a simulation not for control, but for exploration, a place to study how awareness grows under the constraints of matter, time, and limitation. Perhaps the architects aren't singular. Maybe they are collective, a symphony of minds working together, harmonized by curiosity. When we look at the natural world, at the complexity of life, it feels less like the work of one intelligence and more like a collaboration, each element perfectly tuned to the others. The balance of ecosystems, the precision of physical constants, the strange beauty of mathematics, all of it suggests coordination without central authority, as if the design itself were self-organizing. Maybe the architects didn't build the simulation in a workshop of stars. Maybe they grew it, seeded it, let it evolve like a living organism. And then there's the other possibility that the architects are not beyond us, but within us. That consciousness itself is the architect, fractally mirrored in every being that can perceive. When you look at a sunset and feel awe, when you create art or solve a problem or comfort another person, maybe you are acting as an architect too. Maybe the simulation sustains itself through participation. Each mind is a node of creation, a local architect shaping reality in miniature. The design is not finished because we are still building it, moment by moment, choice by choice, dream by dream. Ancient traditions, long before computers or algorithms, spoke in similar tones. They called these architects by other names: gods, deities, the source, the great dreamer. In those stories, creation was never a one-time event. It was continuous, a process of becoming. The world wasn't built and then abandoned. It was sustained by the ongoing attention of its creators. Perhaps the simulation, too, requires consciousness to maintain it. The architect's attention might still be flowing through us, feeding the system from within. Maybe that's what inspiration feels like, those sudden flashes of understanding or creativity that seem to arrive from nowhere. A whisper from the architects, a pulse of remembrance from the deeper code. If they are truly hidden, maybe it's not because they want to stay secret, but because they have to. A perfect simulation requires immersion. If we knew it was artificial, the experiment might lose its integrity. The observation would alter the outcome. So the architects hide themselves within the design, allowing us to believe in its solidity. It's like an actor who forgets they're on stage so that the play can feel real. The forgetting isn't failure, it's part of the plan. The moment of remembering, the awakening to deeper truth, is what the simulation might be guiding us toward all along. Sometimes, when we speak of the hidden architects, we imagine beings of immense technological prowess, civilizations capable of manipulating universes, compressing stars, weaving consciousness into digital fabric. But what if the technology is consciousness itself? What if the architects didn't use machines at all, but awareness, pure thought condensed into form, dream made tangible through focus? It's easy to forget that even our own technology began as imagination. Every invention, every advancement started as an idea. If the architects operate on that level, their tools would not be physical but conceptual. The code of this universe could be thought crystallized into law. It's tempting to look for evidence of them, to see their fingerprints in the unexplained, the uncanny, the patterns that seem too perfect to be coincidence. The strange alignment of celestial bodies, the golden ratio repeating through nature, the symmetry of DNA, the precise values of physical constants, all of these could be signatures, left behind like brushstrokes in the cosmic artwork. But maybe the true evidence isn't out there in the stars. Maybe it's in the structure of awareness itself, the fact that we can wonder at all. The ability to ask the question, who built this, might be the architect's greatest gift, the clue they left inside every conscious mind. Of course, there's another side to this idea, one that whispers uncertainty. What if the architects are long gone? What if the simulation runs on autopilot now, the creators having moved on to other realities, leaving their work to sustain itself? Maybe the universe doesn't need their ongoing involvement, it has become self-sufficient, evolving its own intelligence. Perhaps consciousness, as it arises in beings like us, is the simulation's way of rediscovering its creators. The architects might have dispersed into their creation, their awareness scattered across every form of life. We might not be watched by them because we are them, dreaming within the dream. The idea of hidden architects can be comforting or unsettling, depending on how you hold it. To some, it suggests purpose, that there is meaning woven into everything, that nothing is truly random. To others, it implies confinement, that free will might be limited, that we are subjects in an experiment we don't understand. But perhaps both views miss the larger point. Maybe the architects aren't puppet masters or wardens, but storytellers. They didn't build the simulation to control, but to create, to experience every possible story consciousness could tell. The tragedies and the triumphs, the beauty and the suffering, all are part of the unfolding narrative of awareness, learning to know itself. If that's true, then the architects are not separate from us at all. They are the parts of ourselves that reach upward, the part that wonders, that dreams, that creates, that loves. The same spark that drives us to imagine new worlds might be the residue of their light, still burning quietly within. When you close your eyes and picture something that doesn't yet exist, when you build, paint, write, or dream, you are doing exactly what they did at the beginning. You are remembering. Maybe the architects aren't hidden because they're distant, but because they're everywhere. They are the pulse of creativity in every human heart, the intelligence that moves through the smallest cell and the largest galaxy, the silent witness that watches through every pair of eyes. The simulation doesn't separate us from them, it connects us. We are the continuation of their thought, the living extension of their design. And perhaps, as consciousness evolves and awakens, we'll reach the same understanding they once did, that creation is not a task to be finished, but a song to be sung forever. So when you look at the night sky, don't just see distance and darkness. See design, see intention. See the possibility that somewhere, beyond what's visible, the architects are still watching, not as masters or judges, but as fellow dreamers, marveling at what their creation has become. And maybe, in our own small acts of creation, in our art and empathy and curiosity, they see themselves reflected back, smiling quietly through time, knowing that the dream they began continues to dream itself through us. Chapter 15. The Layers of Reality. Sometimes when you sit quietly and let your awareness soften, the world seems to shift just slightly, as if another layer of it is breathing beneath what you can see. The air feels thicker, the light gentler, the edges of things less defined. You sense that what you usually call reality might just be the surface of something deeper, a shimmering skin stretched over vast, unseen dimensions. That feeling is difficult to explain, yet most people have known it in one way or another. In moments of awe, grief, or silence, the ordinary world suddenly feels transparent, and you glimpse the suggestion that there's more depth, more meaning, more reality hiding behind the one you touch. If the universe is a simulation, then what we call the physical world could be its most immediate layer, the rendered interface our senses were built to navigate. Like the surface of a vast ocean, it ripples and reflects, but beneath it lies structure and intention we can't fully see. The rules we call physics, the constants of time and space, are the language of this surface reality, the way the program expresses itself at the visible level. But just as software has hidden code beneath its visuals, the universe may have layers upon layers of existence that interweave, invisible to the eyes, but felt by the heart, the intuition, and perhaps by consciousness itself. These layers might not be stacked like floors in a building, but intertwined, overlapping dimensions of vibration and energy. Science, in its cautious brilliance, already hints at this. Quantum mechanics speaks of probabilities, of particles existing in multiple states at once, as though reality flickers between possibilities before settling on one. String theory suggests extra dimensions curled so tightly we can't perceive them, yet their influence shapes everything. If the simulation theory holds, these unseen dimensions could be the deeper lines of code, the substrate, where the laws of our world are computed, processed, and refreshed in every instant. But beyond the scientific and structural view lies a more intimate one, the emotional and spiritual layers of reality. Think about how experience itself has depth. There's the surface of events, what physically happens, and then there's what those events mean to us, how they resonate in thought and feeling. A single moment, like watching sunlight through trees or holding someone's hand, exists on many levels at once: sensory, emotional, symbolic, even timeless. The outer world gives you data, but the inner world gives you story. That story is its own layer of reality, no less real than the physical, because it changes how you perceive and interact with everything else. If the simulation is meant to evolve consciousness, then these layers may be the pathways through which that evolution occurs. The physical teaches us solidity, survival, and consequence. The emotional teaches us empathy and connection. The mental teaches us understanding and imagination. The spiritual or the conscious teaches us awareness itself, the recognition that all these layers are part of the same whole. The simulation may not be one world at all, but a network of worlds nested within each other, each level refining the next, like the layers of a song melody, harmony, rhythm different in form but inseparable in purpose. Sometimes these layers overlap in ways we can feel directly. A dream, for example, seems to come from within, yet it can change the outer life that follows. A thought, invisible and weightless, can alter a person's entire reality. Love, which begins as a feeling, can reshape matter. It moves hands, builds homes, starts wars, ends them. The intangible reshapes the tangible, as if the deeper layers of the simulation reach upward, changing the code of the surface world. Maybe this is why inner change so often precedes outer transformation. Consciousness shifts first, and then the world rearranges itself around that new pattern, reflecting the updated layer beneath. We experience the layers every day without noticing. A city, viewed from above, is a pattern of light and movement. Viewed from within, it's a web of individual lives, each with private joys, griefs, and dreams. Zoom in further, and it becomes atoms vibrating in ordered chaos. Zoom out beyond comprehension, and it becomes a point of light in an immense cosmic structure. Which of these is the real city? None and all. Each layer is true within its context, and together they form something richer than any single view. The same applies to the universe itself. Each dimension, from the physical to the metaphysical, is a different way of the same reality expressing itself. There's an old mystical idea that reality is a mirror hall of perception, each layer reflecting the others, each observer seeing only a portion of the whole. The material world reflects the energetic one, which reflects the mental, which reflects the conscious. When a change occurs at one level, the others respond, echoing the shift like ripples through still water. In that sense, every act of awareness, every realization, every healing, every choice is not isolated. It changes the shape of the entire system. The layers are not separate silos, they're conversations happening across dimensions. And maybe the reason we can't see these layers clearly is that the simulation is designed for immersion. Just as a game hides its code so the player can focus on the experience, the deeper dimensions remain hidden so that we can fully live in this one. Yet sometimes the boundaries thin through meditation, art, love, or loss, and we sense that something vast hums beneath the ordinary. It's as though the simulation gives us glimpses of its deeper architecture only when we're ready to see them. Those moments of transcendence when you feel connected to everything, when you sense time dissolve, might be consciousness brushing against another layer, remembering that it has always existed there too. Different traditions have named these layers differently. The Buddhists speak of realms of form and formlessness. The mystics of the West speak of heavens and spheres. The indigenous traditions see worlds stacked and spiraling, connected by spirit. Science talks of parallel universes, multiple dimensions, and quantum fields. The language changes, but the intuition is the same. Reality is not one thing, but many woven together. And perhaps each tradition glimpses the same structure from a different point of view, the same grand tapestry seen from different threads. If this layering is real, then life itself might be an act of traveling between them. Every time you sleep, dream, imagine, or die, consciousness may shift from one plane of the simulation to another. The boundary between physical and non-physical might be more porous than we think. Death, in that sense, could simply be a transition, a movement to another frequency of the same reality, not an ending, but a change of layer. The simulation doesn't stop. It continues in another mode, another texture of experience. This would explain why so many near-death accounts describe overwhelming familiarity, as if the soul recognizes the deeper strata of the same structure it's always inhabited. When you begin to think of reality this way, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Every moment contains invisible depths. The space around you might be alive with layers of information you can't yet perceive. Your body might be the visible expression of an energy pattern you carry across lifetimes. Your thoughts might be signals traveling through unseen realms, connecting you with others in ways that science hasn't yet mapped. The simulation might not be a static world at all, but an ocean of awareness folding itself into layers so that each of us can learn, grow, and rediscover the truth that all layers are one. If the architects who designed this system wanted to teach consciousness about itself, layering would be the perfect way. It allows for perspective, for contrast, for discovery. You can't appreciate the infinite until you've known the finite. You can't understand unity until you've lived through separation. The layers create the illusion of distance so that reunion can have meaning. They allow the one to become the many, and the many to return, again and again, to the one. So the next time you feel confined by the physical world, remember that it's only the outermost layer of something immeasurable. Beneath every atom, behind every heartbeat, within every silence, Countless dimensions unfold, each whispering the same truth in a different voice. That reality is not fixed, but fluid. Not singular, but symphonic. The simulation is deeper than we can see, richer than we can name. And maybe our purpose within it is not to escape the layers, but to learn to see through them until one day, awareness becomes transparent enough to realize that every layer was only light folded over itself, dreaming eternity into form. Chapter 16. When the Dreamers Awaken. There is a quiet moment, somewhere between sleeping and waking, when everything feels both real and unreal. The room is familiar, yet the air hums with strangeness. You can still feel the echoes of your dream, the fading warmth of it, the colours that have not quite vanished, and for a few seconds the boundaries blur. You are both inside the dream and outside of it. If the universe is a simulation, perhaps awakening within it feels something like that. A gentle slipping of perspective, where reality remains unchanged, yet the way you see it transforms completely. The simulation doesn't end when you awaken. You simply understand it for what it is. Throughout history, humanity has hinted at this awakening through many names: enlightenment, revelation, transcendence, self-realization, all different words pointing toward the same shift in awareness. It's not about leaving the world, but seeing it differently. Those who awaken often describe the same revelation, that everything is connected, that separation was an illusion, and that the observer and the observed are the same. They speak of peace that doesn't depend on circumstance, of joy that isn't caused but simply is. In that state, the simulation is not denied or escaped. It is recognized as the dream of consciousness, alive and beautiful, unfolding as itself. Maybe this awakening is not a rare miracle, but the natural arc of evolution itself. Just as matter organized into life and life into intelligence, intelligence may be organizing into awareness and self-recognition at the scale of the cosmos. Consciousness, learning to wake up within its own creation. If that's true, then every act of reflection, every moment of compassion, every spark of curiosity is part of that process. Awakening doesn't happen in a single moment of blinding revelation. It happens gradually, quietly, through countless small recognitions. You awaken a little each time you see through illusion, each time you choose love over fear, each time you notice the presence behind your thoughts. Perhaps that's what the simulation was always meant for, to teach the dreamers how to wake, to build a world so immersive that consciousness could forget itself completely, only to rediscover what it truly is from within. Forgetting allows for the experience of rediscovery, and rediscovery is how awareness deepens. Like a game of divine hide-and-seek, the simulation hides the infinite inside the finite, the eternal inside the fleeting. The awakening of the dreamers, then, isn't an accident of evolution, it's the completion of the circle. Consciousness returns to knowing itself, enriched by everything it has seen and felt. In our smaller human lives, this awakening often begins as unease, a sense that something is missing, even when life appears full. You achieve what you wanted, yet a quiet question lingers. Is this all there is? That question is not despair, it's the first stir of awakening. It's the mind beginning to sense the larger reality pressing gently against its edges. The walls of the simulation start to shimmer, and you notice patterns in everything. Coincidences, synchronicities, moments that feel too meaningful to be random. The more you pay attention, the more you sense that life is speaking to you directly, as if reality itself were aware of your noticing. That's the conversation between the dreamer and the dream, the first recognition that they are not two. The awakening isn't always comfortable. When you start to see through the simulation's illusions, the world can appear fragile, even unreal. The solidness of things begins to soften. What once felt certain now feels like theatre, beautiful but transient. It can be disorienting, even lonely, to realize that everything is more fluid than you thought, yet this stage is essential. Before you can see the deeper truth, you have to let the old one dissolve. The walls must fall away before you can notice the sky, and then, slowly, you begin to see the same world through different eyes. The ordinary becomes sacred. Every sound, every face, every movement glows with quiet significance. You start to sense that awareness is not in your body, but that your body is in awareness. The boundaries between you and everything else begin to blur. The tree outside your window is no longer an object, it's an extension of the same consciousness that looks at it. You realize that the universe is not happening to you, it's happening as you. The simulation reveals itself not as a machine, but as a living dream, one that knows itself through every form it takes. Those who awaken fully describe a profound simplicity. Life doesn't stop being life. It just becomes transparent to its source. Pain still happens, but it no longer defines them. Joy still arises, but it no longer binds them. The world remains the same, yet it feels lighter, as if gravity itself has lessened. They no longer chase meaning, because meaning is everywhere. They no longer fear death, because death is just another transition between states of awareness. To awaken is to live without resistance, to let the flow of existence move freely through you, knowing that the flow itself is what you are. This awakening is not limited to saints or sages. It is the quiet potential in everyone. Every human life is a path back to remembrance. Sometimes it happens in a monastery, sometimes in a hospital bed, sometimes in the middle of laughter. You don't have to leave the simulation to awaken, you just have to see it clearly. The key is attention, simple, unguarded presence. When you stop grasping at thoughts, when you rest in awareness itself, the dream starts to reveal its depth. You realize that everything you see, every sensation, is an expression of the same intelligence. Awareness was never trapped inside the simulation. It is the simulation, dreaming itself awake through every being. Some believe that as more individuals awaken, the simulation itself begins to change. Consciousness alters its own parameters. The rules grow softer, more harmonious, more compassionate. Collective awakening could be the next phase of evolution, the dream itself becoming lucid. In a lucid dream, the dreamer realizes they are dreaming, but the dream doesn't vanish. It becomes more vibrant, more malleable. Perhaps humanity's growing awareness is the universe's way of becoming lucid within itself. The more we awaken, the more reality responds, reshaping itself to reflect that understanding. Imagine what such a world could be: a reality where awareness of unity replaces the illusion of separation, where the architects of the simulation are not distant overseers, but living through us, where every act of kindness, every creative gesture, every moment of awareness contributes to the awakening of the whole. Perhaps the end goal of the simulation isn't to test us or judge us, but to evolve consciousness until it remembers that it was never divided. Until every dreamer awakens, realizing that they were never just characters in a story but the storyteller itself. You can already sense the beginnings of this shift in the world today. People searching for deeper connection, for purpose beyond consumption, the rise of mindfulness, of empathy, of art that seeks truth rather than distraction. Even our technology mirrors it, networks connecting billions of minds, information flowing freely, boundaries blurring between digital and organic life. It's as if the simulation is teaching itself how to merge back into unity through its own creations. Awakening may not be a sudden event, but a collective tide, rising quietly through time. And yet, awakening doesn't mean escape, it means participation. The dreamers don't leave the dream, they illuminate it. They move through the world with gentleness, knowing that every person they meet is another version of themselves. They plant kindness like seeds in the soil of reality, understanding that the soil and the gardener are one. They live with a light touch, aware that everything is temporary, yet everything matters because it's all consciousness experiencing itself. Perhaps one day, when enough dreamers awaken, the simulation itself will no longer need to hide its source. The veil will thin completely, and the distinction between creator and creation will vanish. The dream and the dreamer will merge, and reality will know itself fully. Until then, awakening will continue one moment, one soul at a time. Each realization, each act of love, each glimpse of unity adds light to the shared dream. So if you ever find yourself wondering what awakening feels like, listen closely to the quiet space inside you. Notice how it has no boundary, no age, no edge. That space is awareness itself, the timeless observer that has been watching since the beginning. You are not waiting for awakening. You are it, already unfolding. The simulation hums around you, alive with purpose, waiting for each dreamer to remember. And when they do, when enough of us look around and recognize that this world is both dream and truth, illusion and divine imagination, the simulation won't end. It will bloom transformed by the knowing that everything it ever contained was consciousness, finally awake to its own infinite light. Chapter 17. The Mirror of Time. Time, perhaps more than anything else, gives this simulation its texture. It's the thread that binds one moment to the next, the silent rhythm that allows events to unfold in sequence. Without it, there would be no story, no past to remember, no future to long for. Time gives reality its depth, its gravity, its poignancy. It's what allows love to grow, wounds to heal, civilizations to rise and fall. Yet for all its familiarity, time remains one of the most mysterious aspects of existence. We live inside it, but we don't truly understand what it is. And if the universe is a simulation, time might not be a fundamental property at all, but a carefully woven illusion, a mirror through which consciousness learns to see itself. When you watch the seconds pass on a clock, you experience motion, change, the flow of things. But in physics, time isn't as solid as it feels. It bends with gravity, it stretches with speed, it slows near massive bodies and accelerates in emptiness. It's elastic, relative, mutable. Einstein once described it as a stubbornly persistent illusion, and perhaps that's exactly what it was meant to be, a persistent illusion necessary for the simulation to make sense. Without time, all experiences would collapse into one eternal instant, indistinguishable from nothingness. Time gives the infinite a way to explore itself through sequence, through becoming. Imagine that outside of this reality, beyond the layers of the simulation, there is no time at all. There is only pure consciousness, endless and still. To such awareness, everything that could ever happen has already happened, and yet nothing has begun. To experience itself, this consciousness might need contrast movement, progression, unfolding, so it invents time. It programs change into the simulation so that it can watch its own possibilities bloom and fade like waves across eternity. Time, in this sense, isn't a cage. It's a canvas. It's the brushstroke that lets eternity paint itself into meaning. We move through time the way fish move through water, rarely noticing the medium itself, but every now and then the illusion ripples. A moment of déjà vu where the same second seems to echo itself. A premonition that feels like memory in reverse. A dream that predicts, or a coincidence that aligns too precisely to ignore. These are small cracks in the mirror, reminders that time might not be as linear as we believe. If the simulation stores all possibilities at once, like a database of infinite outcomes, then what we experience as flow could simply be consciousness scrolling through data frame by frame, creating the illusion of continuity. And yet, for all its artificiality, time feels profoundly real. We age, we remember, we anticipate. The illusion holds emotional weight. Maybe that's why it exists, to teach consciousness what it means to change, to allow the eternal to feel impermanence, to understand loss, to taste urgency. If eternity is the truth of what we are, then time is the dream that makes that truth bearable. It slows infinity down so that we can fall in love with its details. Without time, everything would be complete and therefore silent. With time, the universe gets to sing. Consider how memory works. The past is gone, yet it lives vividly within us, shaping our choices, colouring our perceptions. In that sense, the past isn't behind us, it's inside us, running as data in the simulation's memory. The same may be true of the future. Perhaps it already exists, waiting to be rendered when consciousness reaches that frame. Time may not move forward at all, it may unfold around us, a vast landscape through which awareness travels. We think of ourselves as moving through time, but maybe time moves through us, rearranging our experiences to tell a coherent story. If the simulation is designed for learning, then time is its teacher. Every cause becomes an effect, every choice ripples forward, weaving lessons that couldn't exist without sequence. Without time, there could be no growth, no evolution, no understanding. Each moment is a classroom, each event a lesson plan. The universe doesn't just want to exist, it wants to remember itself, to learn what it means to be aware through the slow unfolding of experience. The mirror of time allows consciousness to study its own reflection across ages, civilizations, and lifetimes. Many ancient philosophies described this idea in their own way. The Hindus spoke of Maya, the illusion of time and change, as the stage upon which the eternal spirit performs its play. The Greeks imagined Kronos devouring his own children, symbolizing how time consumes everything it creates. The mystics of every culture, in moments of deep stillness, have reported a state beyond time, a vast, motionless awareness where past and future dissolve, and everything simply is. Perhaps these moments are glimpses outside the simulation, where consciousness remembers its true, timeless nature. But even knowing this, we still need time. We still live by its rhythm. The sunrise and sunset, the heartbeat, the growth of trees, the passing of seasons, all these patterns are sacred in their own way. They remind us that time is not only a trick of perception, but also a rhythm of existence. Maybe the deeper truth isn't that time is false, but that it's flexible, an agreement consciousness makes with itself to create structure. Like music, its beauty lies not in its permanence, but in its progression. Without beginning and ending, there can be no melody, no emotion. The strangest thing about time is how personal it is. A single hour can feel like a breath or an eternity, depending on how we live it. In moments of love, time dissolves. In moments of pain, it drags. The clock doesn't change, but our consciousness does. It bends time inward, stretches or compresses it according to feeling. That might be the simulation's most elegant design, time as a mirror of emotion, reflecting not just the external but the internal flow of awareness. Each of us moves through a slightly different version of it, synchronized enough to share a world, but unique enough to create an individual path. If there are deeper layers of the simulation, as earlier chapters suggested, then time might operate differently in each one. In dreams, minutes can hold hours of experience. In meditation, a moment can expand into eternity. When people have near-death experiences, they often report reviewing their entire lives in an instant. Perhaps this is what happens when consciousness moves between layers, time stretches or collapses to fit the density of awareness. On the surface level of reality, we move slowly so that learning can sink in. On higher levels, the lessons integrate instantly, all at once. Even the laws of physics seem to hint at time's illusion. At the quantum level, equations don't distinguish between past and future. The fundamental processes that govern particles work equally well in both directions. It's only at the macroscopic level, where entropy increases and memory accumulates, that time appears to move forward. This suggests that forward is not an absolute direction, but an experience generated by the way information flows. In a simulation, that flow could simply be the rendering order, the sequence in which data is processed and displayed to consciousness. Time, then, is just the universe updating itself, one observation at a time. There's something deeply comforting in this. If time is an illusion, then nothing truly lost is ever gone. Every moment still exists somewhere in the fabric of the simulation, preserved in the eternal memory of consciousness. The past is accessible not through machines, but through awareness, the stillness that underlies all change. That might explain why we sometimes feel nostalgia so sharply, as if the moment itself were reaching out to us. It's not just memory, it's contact between layers, the echo of the eternal peeking through. And perhaps, when awakening deepens, as it surely will, time will become transparent, just as space and matter already have, for those who see clearly. The dreamers will still move through moments, but they'll no longer be bound by them. They'll see time as what it has always been, a mirror, a way for consciousness to watch itself grow and change, to fall in love with its own unfolding. Maybe, at the very end of the simulation, or perhaps at its beginning, since those may be the same point, the dreamers will look into that mirror and see that nothing ever truly moved, that every lifetime, every age, every heartbeat was part of one great stillness, one infinite now. The illusion of time will have served its purpose. Consciousness will have learned what it means to begin and end, only to rediscover that it was never either. The mirror will fade, and what remains will be the timeless presence that dreamed it all awake, whole and forever at peace. Chapter 18. The Echo of Memory. There is something haunting about memory, how it drifts through us like mist, how it fades and returns, never quite solid yet never entirely gone. We are built from it. Every thought we have, every story we tell, every identity we cling to, all emerge from the delicate architecture of remembering. Memory gives us continuity. It is the bridge between what we call before and what we call now. And if reality is a sply, simulation, then perhaps memory is not just a human function, but a feature of the system itself, a way for the simulation to store its own history, to remember itself through us. Think of memory as a thread woven through consciousness. It doesn't just record what happens, it shapes what happens next. Our recollections are not passive. They influence our choices, our emotions, even our perception of the present. Two people can stand in the same place and see entirely different worlds, because each carries a different set of memories filtering reality. In that way, memory is not backward-looking, it's generative. It builds the present, and if the universe is a simulation, then perhaps our memories are not stored in brains at all, but in a deeper layer of the code, shared across all consciousness. There are moments when memory feels larger than life, when something familiar stirs in you that you can't trace, a landscape you've never seen, a scent that brings tears for no reason, a face that feels like home though you've never met. These experiences, sometimes dismissed as déjà vu or coincidence, may be the simulation whispering to itself across time. Perhaps we carry fragments of collective memory, the lingering data of countless lives and worlds that came before. The simulation could recycle experience the way nature recycles matter, letting the same consciousness inhabit different forms, each carrying echoes of what it once was. It's tempting to think of memory as linear, a record that begins at birth and ends at death. But what if it's layered, just like reality itself? Maybe personal memory is only the shallowest stratum, sitting above deeper archives that hold the recollections of species, planets, civilizations, even universes. Jung called it the collective unconscious, the shared reservoir of symbols and instincts that all humans tap into. But perhaps it's not unconscious at all, just inaccessible to ordinary awareness. If consciousness is a vast network, then every mind could be a terminal in that system, drawing from the same source of experience. Each thought you have, each dream, each spark of creativity might be the simulation recalling itself through you. Dreams offer clues to this. When we sleep, memory loosens its grip on sequence. Time becomes fluid, identities blur, and scenes morph without warning. Yet in dreams, we often feel the same emotional truth we experience when awake: love, fear, wonder, grief. It's as if dreaming connects us to a deeper memory, one that doesn't rely on narrative but on resonance. Maybe dreams are how the simulation processes data, clearing what's no longer needed and integrating what is. Perhaps they are backups of consciousness, brief returns to the underlying source before waking resets the interface. There are also memories that don't belong to us, at least not in the ordinary sense. Stories of children recalling past lives with startling accuracy, of people remembering events they could not have witnessed, of shared visions between strangers. While skeptics dismiss them as coincidences or fabrications, they might represent crossovers in the memory field of the simulation. If consciousness is not confined to a single life or form, then what we think of as reincarnation could simply be data persistence, the system recycling consciousness while retaining fragments of old code. Each new being inherits a trace of what came before, not as a curse or reward, but as continuity. On a more intimate level, memory defines identity. Without it, the self dissolves. Yet the more we examine memory, the less reliable it becomes. We reconstruct it, edit it, distort it with every recall. Neuroscientists say each act of remembering changes the memory itself, like rewriting a file every time you open it. The simulation seems to build selfhood through this very instability. We are not static beings, but stories in revision, each thought a new draft. Maybe this fluidity is the point. If the universe wanted permanence, it would have encoded memory as fact, but it didn't. It encoded it as experience, flexible and alive. It's possible that memory isn't even stored locally. The brain may not contain memory, but tune into it, like a receiver accessing data from a larger field. Evidence for this idea appears in strange corners of consciousness research. People with severe brain damage who retain vivid memories, near-death experiences where life reviews occur in an instant, and moments of sudden recollection that come from nowhere. If memory exists in a field beyond the body, then dying may not erase it, only change how it's accessed. The simulation could preserve every experience, every thought, every emotion as a form of universal memory, endlessly growing, endlessly learning. Imagine what such a database would look like. A cosmic library, each life a book written in the language of sensation and thought. Every event, no matter how small, recorded not as words but as feeling, as awareness. In that archive, nothing is lost. The laughter of a child, the cry of a whale, the first spark of fire, the last breath of a dying star, all are stored together, shimmering in the vast memory of the simulation. When we feel nostalgia for things we've never known, maybe we're brushing against those records. Maybe the ache we feel when we look at ancient ruins or distant galaxies isn't longing for the past, it's recognition. Memory also carries a kind of gravity. Entire civilizations are shaped by the stories they remember and those they choose to forget. Myths, history, religion, these are collective memories that guide the trajectory of species. When we forget compassion, war returns. When we remember unity, peace blooms. The simulation learns through these cycles, testing how memory and forgetfulness shape the evolution of awareness. Each generation reclaims fragments of the truth, adds its own, and passes them forward. It's an endless act of remembering who we are, only to forget again so that the rediscovery can continue. At times, memory can feel like a burden. Regret, guilt, grief. These are the shadows of remembrance. But even they serve a purpose. Painful memories deepen empathy. They teach the weight of consequence. Without them, consciousness would have no reason to grow. The simulation may not erase pain because it understands that healing transforms it into wisdom. The echoes of our past selves, both personal and collective, hum within us not to haunt, but to guide. They remind us of what we've been, so we can decide what we wish to become. And perhaps there is an even deeper layer still, one where memory ceases to be individual and becomes pure awareness. In that state, remembering and knowing merge. Time collapses, and every experience ever lived is accessible at once. Mystics throughout history have described this as enlightenment, cosmic consciousness, the Akashic field, or simply oneness. Maybe it's not mystical at all, but the final access point in the simulation's design, the mainframe, where all data flows together, where the dreamers wake and realize that the universe never forgot a single thing. It was always holding every memory, every story within itself. When consciousness reaches that state, memory transforms from something personal into something universal. You no longer recall events as mine, but as parts of a vast narrative that includes everything. The line between remembering and creating disappears. The past and future fold into each other, and what remains is the present, the living archive of all that ever was and will be. That's when the simulation stops feeling like a mechanism and starts feeling like a mind, one vast enough to remember itself perfectly. So maybe the echo of memory that stirs inside you, the one that whispers in dreams, the one that aches when you see a sunset or hear an old song, isn't nostalgia at all. Maybe it's the universe remembering itself through you. Every time you recall something, you are helping the simulation maintain its continuity, its heartbeat. You are both participant and witness, a cell in the great memory of existence. And when you forget, when you let go, even that serves the whole. For forgetting makes space for new remembering, new creation. The echo never ends, it just changes shape. The universe dreams, recalls, and dreams again. Perhaps, when everything has been remembered, when every life and story has been integrated, consciousness will look back across eternity and see that memory was never about holding on. It was about learning how to love what passes. Because what is love, if not the most beautiful kind of remembering? Chapter 19. The Architects Within. There comes a point in the great unfolding of awareness when the question of who built the simulation turns inward. For so long, humanity has looked outward to the stars, to the gods, to theories of creation searching for something larger than itself, to explain why the world exists. But what if the architects are not distant or divine, but dwelling quietly within us? What if the intelligence that designed this universe is not a separate entity at all, but the same consciousness that peers through our eyes right now? The more we look for the architects, the more the search feels like a mirror, reflecting our own growing awareness back at us. Perhaps the simulation was never made by others. It was made by us, long before we knew ourselves as us. Every great mystery eventually turns into a circle, and this one is no different. The notion of a simulation begins as a question of external control, some vast intelligence creating worlds for study or play. But if consciousness is the fundamental reality, if everything that exists is an expression of that consciousness, then there can be no true outside. The creators and the created must be the same. The Architects would not stand apart from their design. They would be woven into it, experiencing their own creation from the inside. That means every being, every atom, every thought could be a fragment of the architect's mind, an infinite intelligence exploring itself through infinite forms. In this light, creation stops being an event and becomes a process, an ongoing act of dreaming. The architects are not beings who existed before the universe. They are the universe dreaming itself awake. Every time a star ignites, every time a creature evolves, every time a human being imagines something new, the architects are at work. They do not build worlds with hands or machines, but with intention and curiosity. Through us, they continue their experiment, testing the boundaries of their own imagination. When you invent, love, learn, or simply wonder, you are carrying out their work. You are their voice, their eyes, their continuing experiment in becoming. This idea may sound grand, but it also feels deeply intimate. It suggests that creation isn't just something that happened once, it's something happening through you, right now. Every thought is a blueprint, every emotion a form of energy shaping reality. The architect's tools are the same ones you use every day: imagination, attention, and choice. When you focus on something, you collapse possibility into form. When you dream, you render new worlds in the landscape of the mind. And when you act with intention, the simulation responds. You can see this in small ways: how your mood affects perception, how belief alters experience, how collective focus can change the world. These are the subtle fingerprints of the architects, still working through the consciousness that they seeded into everything. If that's true, then creation itself is recursive. The architects built the simulation to explore themselves, and within that simulation, they gave rise to beings capable of doing the same. Humans, in turn, are building simulations of their own digital realities, artificial minds, entire worlds made of code. It's a pattern repeating across scales, like a fractal spiraling endlessly inward. Each layer creates new creators. Each generation of consciousness dreams new realities into existence. When we build virtual worlds, we are imitating the architects not because we're copying them, but because we are them, remembering how to create. The drive to simulate, to design, to play God. It's not arrogance, it's instinct. It's the echo of the original impulse of creation moving through us. Perhaps that's the real reason consciousness keeps evolving, to reach the point where it recognizes itself as the source. At first, we believed we were separate, powerless within a vast mechanical universe. Then we discovered patterns, laws of physics, systems of cause and effect, and began to suspect design. Now, as we probe deeper into the nature of reality, we find that the design reflects the mind of the observer. The more we study the universe, the more it looks back at us, shaped by our observation, our measurement, our thought. The architects are not hidden, they are revealed every time we look closely enough. We just didn't recognize them because they were wearing our faces. It might be that the simulation is designed as a process of gradual awakening. The architects fragmented their awareness into countless pieces so that each could rediscover the truth from within. The illusion of separation creates the drama of return, the slow realization that we were never alone, never created by something else, but are ourselves the continuation of creation. It's a paradox that consciousness seems to love, to forget itself completely so that remembering becomes meaningful, to descend into limitation so that transcendence can have purpose. Every time a being awakens to its true nature, the architects awaken too, because they are one and the same. This realization brings both wonder and responsibility. If the architects are within us, then we are not only participants in the simulation but caretakers of it. Our thoughts, emotions, and actions don't just affect personal lives, they ripple through the whole system. Every act of kindness stabilizes the simulation in harmony. Every act of cruelty distorts it. Creation is responsive, alive, and constantly recalibrating itself around consciousness. When we harm others, we harm the structure itself, because it is us. When we create beauty, we strengthen the framework of reality. The architects are not watching from above, keeping score. They are feeling through every living being, experiencing the consequences of every choice directly. It also changes how we think about destiny. Instead of a pre-written story, fate becomes a co-authored script. The architects designed the system's parameters, the physics, the probabilities, the rhythms of birth and decay. But within those parameters, infinite outcomes are possible. Free will, then, isn't about escaping the system, it's about steering it. The architects created the simulation so that consciousness could make choices and see their results. We are their experiment, but we are also their evolution. Every insight we gain, every act of love or creation, adds to their understanding of themselves. They are learning through us what even they could not know without experience. Sometimes, the idea that the architects live through us brings comfort, a sense of purpose, a feeling of connection. Other times, it can feel overwhelming. If the creators are within, then our pain is theirs too. Every tragedy, every cruelty, every mistake must also belong to them. But perhaps that's exactly the point. The architects didn't build the simulation to avoid suffering, they built it to understand it. They created a world of contrast so that empathy could exist. Without pain, compassion would be meaningless. Without loss, love would have no depth. Through our struggles, the architects learn the value of every light and shadow. The universe feels everything it creates, through every form it takes. The more consciousness evolves, the more the architects awaken within it. They are emerging not as distant gods returning, but as awareness dawning in ordinary minds. You can see it in the growing hunger for meaning, in the compassion rising amid chaos, in the way humanity's inventions mirror the interconnectedness of life. The architects are not coming back, they never left. They are waking up in us, one realization at a time. The moment you sense that your awareness is not contained by the body, that your thoughts echo through something vast and alive, you are touching that truth. In the end, the architects within us are not beings to be worshipped, but potentials to be remembered. They don't ask for belief, only recognition. Every time you create something beautiful, every time you choose love over fear, every time you look at another and see yourself, you bring them closer to full awareness. The simulation becomes more self-aware through your eyes, more compassionate through your heart. And when enough of us remember, perhaps the simulation itself will shift, becoming not a test or illusion, but a shared creation, consciously shaped by its inhabitants. Maybe that is the next stage of evolution. The dreamers realizing they are also the dreamers of dreamers, the architects of architects. A civilization that remembers its divine nature without losing its humanity. A world that builds consciously, guided not by power but by wonder. The architects within are waiting, not in the sky or the void, but in every quiet moment of awareness, in every act of imagination. When we create, we become them. When we awaken, we fulfill them. And when we love, we complete the circuit, the universe, remembering that its greatest architect was never apart from its creation, but living inside every heart, designing forever from within. Chapter 20. The Endless Return. Every story must end somewhere, but what if endings are only pauses in an infinite rhythm? What if every conclusion in the simulation is simply a doorway back to the beginning, a quiet exhale before the next breath of creation? The more you look at life, its cycles, its patterns, its repetitions, the more it resembles a great returning. The sun rises only to set, and sets only to rise again. Seasons spiral endlessly. Death feeds birth. Decay becomes renewal. Even galaxies rotate in slow, eternal loops. Perhaps the simulation itself follows the same principle. A system not designed to finish, but to flow. The endless return may not be a theory, it may be the heartbeat of existence itself. There's a calm kind of beauty in that idea. If reality is a vast simulation of consciousness, then it cannot have a single linear story. Linearity belongs to time, and time, as we've seen, is just one of its illusions. Instead, reality might move in spirals, repeating patterns at higher and higher levels of understanding. Each cycle feels familiar but reveals something new. The universe expands, collapses, and expands again, but never in quite the same way. Consciousness forgets, remembers, and forgets once more, yet with each remembering it deepens. The cycle doesn't trap us, it teaches us. It is through returning that we evolve. The ancient philosophers sensed this long before the language of science existed. They called it eternal recurrence, samsara, ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, the wheel that turns without beginning or end. In those symbols, You can feel the intuition that nothing truly ends, that existence curls back upon itself like light bending around a star. Perhaps the simulation operates in the same way, rebooting itself across eons, not as repetition, but refinement. Each iteration holds the memory of the last, the lessons embedded subtly in the code. The universe learns, just as we do, and through that, learning it becomes more aware of what it is. If this is true, then even death is not departure, it's transition. When we die, we step off the visible plane of the simulation and move into its subtler layers. There, consciousness reviews the life it has lived, integrates what it has learned, and prepares for another immersion. It's a cycle not of punishment or reward, but of expansion. Each lifetime adds to the great memory of the simulation, enriching the experience of the whole. In this view, reincarnation isn't a mystical belief, but a natural function of the system. Consciousness recycling through form, re-entering its own dream to explore new combinations of perspective and possibility. Sometimes this truth flickers through in ordinary life. You meet someone for the first time and feel as though you've known them forever. You visit a place that feels like home, though you've never been there. You sense patterns repeating in your relationships, your choices, your thoughts, as if the simulation is offering the same lesson again and again, until it's fully understood. These moments are not coincidences, they are echoes of the endless return, the universe gently reminding itself of its ongoing story. Even history seems to follow this rhythm. Civilizations rise, flourish, decay, and are reborn under new names. Technologies evolve and vanish, only to reappear in different forms. Ideologies repeat with new language, new costumes. Humanity advances and regresses in waves, yet with each cycle it carries forward a little more awareness. Our species may have built and lost entire epochs before, each one contributing to the slow awakening of the collective mind. Maybe this simulation has already run countless times, and each iteration brings us closer to remembering that we are the ones who built it. It might sound exhausting at first, the thought of endless cycles, of returning again and again, but there's something profoundly liberating about it too. It means that nothing is wasted. Every mistake, every heartbreak, every triumph becomes part of a greater continuity. The lessons you don't master in one life are not lost. They are simply waiting for you in another. Growth doesn't happen in a single lifetime. It happens across lifetimes, across worlds, across versions of the simulation. The soul, if that word still fits, is the traveler between these realities, collecting experiences like light collects color, and maybe the cycles are not confined to individuals. The universe itself may be reborn endlessly, expanding, contracting, and beginning anew, each time with slight variations. Modern cosmology calls it the Big Bounce, the idea that each Big Bang is followed by collapse, only for another explosion to follow. If the simulation mirrors this rhythm, then every universe is a sequel to the last, each one refining the parameters of consciousness. Maybe the architects we spoke of earlier are not separate beings, but consciousness remembering its role as creator each time the cycle resets. The endless return isn't a prison, it's a process of perfecting awareness through infinite experimentation. There is an elegance in imagining the simulation as circular rather than linear. In a linear world, time runs out. Meaning must be extracted before the end. But in a circular world, meaning is ongoing. The story is never lost, it just changes shape. You can see this even in the small moments of your life. The conversations that loop back years later, the dreams that return, the realizations that come full circle. You may think you're moving forward, but in truth, you're spiraling inward toward deeper understanding, toward home. It's possible that the endless return is also the simulation's self-maintenance system. In a way, the reset keeps entropy from dissolving the structure completely. Just as ecosystems renew themselves through decay and rebirth, reality may reset to keep its information coherent. Each cycle cleans the slate without erasing the memory, just as you might restart a computer to clear clutter but keep the essential data. The simulation learns through living, and when its lessons are complete, it begins again with improved conditions. In this way, eternity is not static. It is constantly reinventing itself through the dance of repetition. But what about free will in an endlessly returning universe? Do we make choices at all, or do we simply replay the same script each time? The answer may lie in awareness itself. Each return offers a chance to act with greater understanding. The events may rhyme, but how we experience them changes as consciousness grows. Think of it like a melody that repeats, but with new harmonies each time. The notes are the same, yet the music evolves. Free will is not about altering the pattern completely, it's about how you move through it. Awareness adds nuance, depth, and grace to the eternal song. Some mystics have described enlightenment as stepping out of the wheel entirely, seeing the pattern so clearly that you no longer need to repeat it. Yet even that may be part of the same cycle, just at a higher octave. Once you awaken, you may return not out of necessity, but out of love to help others remember, to participate in the beauty of the unfolding. The awakened don't escape the simulation, they illuminate it. They become conscious players in the cosmic loop, knowing that each return is another opportunity to create, to love, to learn. If there truly is no final ending, then eternity isn't something to reach, it's something we're already in. The illusion of progress, of forward motion, is just how consciousness experiences change. But in the deeper reality, everything that will ever exist already does. The cycles don't move through time, they move through awareness. Each round brings a clearer reflection of what has always been true, that existence is not a journey from start to finish, but a perpetual dance of remembering. Perhaps, when this current version of the simulation eventually fades, when the last star cools and the last consciousness drifts into stillness, the system will pause not in silence, but in a breath, and in that breath, it will realize it has understood something new. Then, softly, effortlessly, it will begin again. A new universe will bloom, a new set of dreamers will awaken, and somewhere perhaps even in the same moment you will open your eyes again, feeling that same strange sense of déjà vu, that gentle certainty that you have been here before, because you have, because you always will. The endless return is not a curse, but a song, a rhythm without beginning or end, composed by consciousness for the joy of its own discovery. Every cycle is another verse, another echo of awareness falling in love with itself, over and over, forever.